All right, we did it. We did it. Isn't that right, Milo? Isn't that right? We did it. We're here. We're queer. We don't want any more bears. How you guys doing today? Today was a chore-centered day. Boy, did I ever need to do it. My chores have been lacking unbelievably. Got the apartment cleaned up. Did all my dishes. Holy cow, those dishes really were piling up. It's one of those things where you start to fall behind, right? You start to fall behind in your daily life, and then before you know it, you look at the project, and the project's enormous, and it seems like such a difficult thing. And really, it's just about chewing away at it. It's just about getting in there, doing what you can, starting to chew away at it, starting to chip away. And before you know it, you're chipping away, and then before you know it, you're 3/4 of the way through. You're sick of doing it. I know that's what happens to me. The worst is when you're doing your dishes. Like for me, how I do my dishes is I get the sink a little bit full of water, dump all of the cutlery in, right? You get all the cutlery into the water so it can soak while you do your dishes, right? You take a dish and maybe you soak it for a bit while you do another dish or something like this, and so on and so forth, and into the thing. And then you get all your dishes done, and then it happens to me every single time. I get all my dishes done, everything's looking pretty good. I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to wipe everything down, make sure everything's nice and clean, and then I remember, oh yeah, there's all the cutlery. And it's just like cleaning cutlery. It just feels and it feels so niggling and so just nah. But you gotta do it. You gotta clean your forks and your knives and your spoons, or else you're not gonna have any forks or knives or spoons. Isn't that right, Milo? Isn't that right? Well, hope you guys are all doing well today. Today's clip was about the World Bank. Guys, get this. This is so stupid. This is the dumbest thing of life. Do you need what evidence do we need that shows that our societies are in massive decline? That Western civilization is in massive decline. Here's the World Bank, right? Physicians per 1,000 people, Cuba, right? So physicians per 1,000 people. Here's Cuba, right? You scroll on down. All countries and economies. Well, that's nice. Let's scroll down to Cuba. Right? Cuba. So, per capita, so for every 1,000 citizens, they have 8.4 doctors. Isn't that nice? That's a nice number. You compare it to Croatia, for example, right? Costa Rica, right? The Czech Republic's at 4. But then you go on down. Let's compare it to my home country, good old Canada. Canada, 2.4. Oh, well, that's considerably lower. Right? 8.4 is considerably lower. Well, when you actually take the time to do the math on this, right? You actually do it. What do you find out? Cuba has more doctors than Canada does total. Not just per capita, total. Why is Canada and the United States not doing so well in this pandemic? I can't wonder. Oh my God. Why do you think? It's because we don't have doctors. We have less doctors than tiny little island nations. Right? Not per capita. We don't have less doctors per capita, which we do have less doctors per capita than Cuba, right? But we also have less doctors total. If this doesn't convince you that something is going wrong with our society, if this doesn't convince you that something has gone completely wrong, we're being defeated by little tiny island nations who incidentally are also experiencing massive sanctions, right? Yep, Cuban medical training is tuition free, world-class institution. Yep. Turns out that if you actually just decide to build an institution, as a people. Turns out if you just say, hey, there's an institution here, trains doctors, we're going to make it the best we possibly can. You know what happens? It works. Like, this society is like total junk. Like, more and more, it's just like junk. Like, it's so fucking stupid. The stupid asinine conversations we're having, the dumb things we're focusing on, the absurd, ridiculous nonsense that's coming out of the right. Like, I'm not going to talk about this right now, but like, here's the National Post article, Jordan Peterson, why I'm no longer a tenured professor at the University of Toronto. And it's essentially just a whine about diversity hires and how these institutions are trying to get more people of color, right, and more sexual diversity in their ranks, right? And he's basically crying about it because his entire argument is that it's the classic argument that people who are not as proficient or as good will get into these positions, right? Which is itself just a racist statement, right? Like, oh, they're not as qualified. Well, why do you say they're not as qualified, right? Well, because they're black and they got picked. They got preferential picking because they're black. It's like, right, but they also need to be competent, right? Like, the role of the program is to be like, there's one slot, you have two candidates of equal competence. Well, we are going to give preference towards people who have been previously disenfranchised, right? But Peterson just assumes these people don't have competence, and attributes the lack of competence not to, let's say, like a pandemic. Like, there's one point where he says something like, I'm getting insiders tell me that kids are struggling with first level statistics, and I'm like, yeah, dude, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, kids aren't learning anything. Like, nobody's learning anything in the middle of this fucking pandemic, dude. Like, no, it's got to be that they're black, right? That's the problem, right? But so this is the nonsense kind of level conversations that we're having in this society. We're not having a conversation about, like, hey, why do we have less doctors than Cuba? Like, straight up, period. Like, why do we have less doctors than Cuba? Good to see you too, Alex. How you doing, bud? Like, and this is why it's so important that, like, we actually get real leftists into the conversation, right? And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. It's like, I am trying to present myself as a leftist who is actually going to be in the conversation, because I'm so sick and tired of, like, all of these conversations just exclude anything left to of the liberal, right? Like, you can occasionally get, like, a social democrat in there, but, like, why can't... And so even if the question of, like, hey, why are there more doctors in Cuba than in Canada, even if it came up, the solutions would range from the far right, free market capitalist solutions, right? We've got to incentivize. They would argue that we have to privatize these institutions because then we could offer, like, higher rates of pay and let the free market decide, right? Let chaos reign, that kind of thing. And then there would be just, like, you get to the liberal side and they'd be like, no, we need to increase the quality of the education, right? That's a very liberal thing to say. But no one is going to even allow the communists to come to the table and be like, universities should be free. We should be completely incentivizing people to become doctors in the first place, right? Like, we should be mandating a certain level of pay. We should be mandating a certain quality of life for the doctors that we train, right? You literally can't even get a seat at the table if you're talking that way, right? It's exactly the same with, like, the housing crisis, right? Which I consider to be, like, an affront. Like, the doctor conversation, you can kind of see how it'd be like, oh yeah, I guess so, like, there's this, that, and the other thing. But in terms of housing, like, it really is a conversation between, like, psychopaths and people who have brains. And, like, but the people who have brains or empathy or compassion, right? The furthest to the left they're willing to go is we should tax speculators, right? And it's like, that's not going to work. Right? It's simply not going to work. And any conversation to the left of that, like somebody like me standing up and saying it's not going to work because they have $1 billion and you could like double the cost of the investment and they would still buy it because they've run out of things to buy, and buying housing is crucial. Like these guys want to like privatize water, for God's sakes. Like that's the quality of person we're talking about here. Like we're not talking about like rational, compassionate, empathetic people. We're talking about psychopaths. And if you don't even let someone come to the table and point out that like that's not a solution, like it's not going to work, and to even say like there is a simple solution to the housing crisis, like the solution is actually very simple. Take people who have extra properties and transfer them to people who do not have properties. Right? That's the solution. But can't do that, right? You can't even get a seat at the table talking that way. Like, so that's, yeah. But John, we just have to build more houses that we turn around and sell to the billionaire class, right? Like that's exactly, right? That these sort of non-solutions, that like that kind of statement, we have to build more houses, like that's a conservative position. Like that's what the liberals and the conservatives are saying. And like, so what's happening in our society is that there's the breadth, we pretend as though we live in a free speech society. And it makes sense that the conversation surrounding freedom of speech is more about protecting Nazis than it is about protecting homeless people, for example. And the goal of this channel ultimately is to get a seat at the table. Is to just straight out become big enough so that they can't simply ignore you, and so that we can get at the table and even say out loud in the public sector, like, hey, like, why don't we just train doctors? Like, why are we saddling people with $100,000 of debt, right? And then forcing them into this system where they're completely unsupported. Oh, and hey, like, why aren't we talking about the fact that the conservatives and the liberals are obviously allied in their quest to privatize the healthcare system? Like, it's obvious that they're allied, right? But no, you don't even get a seat at the table. Like, you're not even there. The best that you can get is just more free market failed ideas of chaos, right? Or like tax incentivization or anything like this. The idea that we could simply solve this problem by deciding to solve it, it's just not part of the conversation. Good to see you, Harry. Good to see you, Ezial. Grinning. Always good to see you, bud. If you build them, they will buy. Yeah, it's supply-side economics, right? Like, build the supply, and then people will buy the supply, right? So it's trickle-down economics. That's what that is, right? And it doesn't work. It's a failure, right? It's a religious ideology at this point. We can call it for what it is. Like, we don't need to pretend like it's an actual economic system. It's not interested in solving the problem. It's interested in pretending like it's solving the problem so that we can extract as much wealth as possible from the society. Imagine they lock us up underground and they privatize sunlight. Yeah. I mean, there was a Simpsons episode about that, right? Remember, Mr. Burns blocked out the sun? Right? He blocked out the sun so that everybody would have to use his power, right? How about abolishing private property and allowing workers to receive full value of their labor rather than having that value siphoned away through stocks and monopoly? Yeah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that kind of comment being made at, like, you know, the Steve Pakin's The Agenda or something? Right? Any of these panel shows? Like the CBC has a panel show. Can you imagine somebody saying that? Right? No. It's just not part of the conversation. And if you do say it, then you get hacks like Jordan Peterson talking about communism, which he knows nothing about. Right? Like, you just get the far right just saying, and that's the extent of the debate. Because we're just supposed to assume that reefer madness is the way that we organize ourselves. Doctor scarcity is artificial, yeah. The AMA and the government decide how many doctors to train, keep demand high and supply low. Well, and also, like, they're trying to privatize the system. Why would you train a bunch of doctors and have, like, a good quality of life and a stable system when you're trying to dismantle that system? Right? They're actively attempting to dismantle the system. And that's both the liberals and the conservatives, right? They have both agreed with one another that now that like the Tommy Douglas NDP and the socialists and the communists are dealt with and are quiet, right? Now that that movement has been decimated and we've attacked the labor unions and we've destroyed the working class movements and we've gone after labor and all this kind of stuff, now it's time to decimate all of the gains that those movements made, right? And one of the key features, and you can see this across the board, right? You see this in the UK with the assault against the National Health Service, right? And the same thing is going to happen here in Canada, right? That they are going to go after the healthcare system in serious and significant ways. They've gotten to the point now where they're comfortable enough saying, "Oh well, we can introduce private elements," right? That's how they're sneakily trying to get in on it, right? Just by being like, "Oh, we can introduce like a private element," you know, and their whole grift is to claim that the social system doesn't work, to claim that the socialized healthcare is actually inefficient. When if you observe it, and it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Like it takes like cursory analysis to realize that like, oh yeah, like the conservatives come in and they cut the healthcare system down to the right down to the level where the healthcare professionals won't go on strike, right? Like that's exactly what's happened right now, where they're protesting, but they're not striking. So it's like, okay, we got it down as low as we're willing to go. Then the liberals come in and they just keep it there. Like maybe they'll increase it by like 0.0001%, just enough to shut these guys up, right? Just enough to get them to shut up. Like, so it goes down like this, and then maybe the liberals go like that. Right? And then the conservatives come in and it goes down again, right? Down again. And then eventually even the liberal is talking about privatization because they're like, well, the system's not working. We have to come up with public-private partnerships. Yeah, it'll be a partnership between the government and the private sector, right? And we all just are like, yeah, that makes total sense and is not exactly a fascist system precisely. And you can see how it's a brutal lie, right? You see how it's a brutal lie and a complete con and a total grift because other countries that don't do this, that focus exclusively on building a stable social system through their government, Cuba has more doctors than we do. And those doctors are better trained and they're not laden with debt and they can help their society. And they it doesn't take a genius to figure this stuff out, right? Like, it's obviously a grift, and the people who are still defending it are either deluded or complicit at this point. Like, it's right in front of your face. But how do they maintain this grift, and how do they maintain this con? They ensure that voices like mine don't even get a seat at the table. That's how it works. Yep, profit becomes a bottleneck through which all activity must flow, right? And it is a religious ideology. It's the worship of money, right? That's what the profit motive is. It's just the worship of money. And when you actually like realize like money is fake, like it's not real, it's like a promissory note at best. Like, then you see that your worship of it is like the worship of a false god. And there can't be, it has to be catastrophe, right? You can't actually organize a civil society this way. It doesn't actually work. You know? Like, let chaos reign. I can't believe that chaos is reigning when we're walking around saying, let chaos reign. Like, that's the best part. Like, that's the best part. Is that for decades now, since at least the 60s, right? If not a little bit earlier, right? The prevailing ideology has been let the market decide. Deregulate capitalism, let the free market decide. The invisible hand of the market will decide. And it's like, okay, well, it has. And oh, you're shocked. You're shocked that if you say let chaos reign, that when chaos reigns, everybody's like, what? So, like, the natural world just gives us like the flu plus one, or gives us like the most modest challenge ever, and we just can't organize ourselves. And this is why what we have done is actually extremely dangerous, which is that we are so far behind, and we have fallen. Like, we're not a civilization, we're not a culture. We don't have those things. Like, those things don't exist, right? We have a business edifice, and if we wanted to organize ourselves in order to actually deal with the natural world, we literally have to begin from scratch. We don't even have the institutions in place to be able to do that. Like, that's where we're at. That we have to purge our culture such that it exists, or the airwaves of these chaos death lords, right? These guys that are saying we should worship death and chaos, right? Let the free hand of the free market decide, all this kind of stuff. So we would have to purge ourselves of these people, and then purge ourselves of the people that they've trained, right? And this is basically anyone from the Fraser Institute, anyone from like the University of Toronto, the University of Calgary, right? All like the Chicago boys, certainly, right? The University of British Columbia, right? Like, economics is not an economic system. Like, they're not interested in economics. They're interested in a religious ideology. And so not only are we going to have to purge ourselves of these frauds and hacks, we'll have to purge ourselves of the frauds and hacks that they have trained, and while simultaneously also erecting social systems in order to do the job that they refuse and fail and do everything they can to prevent. Like, these people are standing in the way of progress in meaningful ways, right? Like, and when I say progress, I literally mean like get food and shelter into people's hands. Like, and you see how it's manifesting in our society through the basic conversation of should everyone have food and shelter. Like, you do not have a civilization. You do not have a culture if you are asking the question, should everyone have food and shelter? One of the basic attributes of a civilization, one of the basic attributes of a culture, is the idea that everyone has access to the resources that exist within the civilization and the culture, right? We're not even having a debate about how to distribute those resources. We're not having a debate about how to get people connected to those resources. We're having a debate as to whether or not those people get access to those resources at all. We're not a culture or a civilization. Like, and you can't organize a culture or a civilization along those lines, because the people who you abandon, which is what we're describing, right? We're describing a system of abandonment, go on and they create their own models and their own systems and their own support systems that are separate from the culture and the civilization. And so in this way, you've created an antagonism, right? Like, and the whole society is built on these antagonisms. And so it has to collapse. It has to. And I've been thinking about this more and more. There's a fellow in here, was it yesterday? And things got really somber because I had to kind of break the news to him. He was espousing an idea that we should foment a violent revolution, right? That we should pick up weapons and actually take to the halls of power and seize them violently. And I had to sort of inform him, like, that's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. Not because we'll get smashed militarily. Like, even if we managed to seize the halls of power through a violent revolution, the society is so fractured and broken that the seizing of the halls of power would essentially dissolve the Federated Union. That it would just lead to what is going to happen in our society anyway, which is the balkanization of the society. Because we're not a culture or a civilization. We're not a unified people, right? The way that the Russians were as they went through their revolution, or the way that the Chinese people were as they went through their revolution, or the Vietnamese or the Cambodians, right? That these places actually had a civilization and a culture first, and they were just having a discussion about who gets to lead it, right? Whereas we don't have a culture or a civilization. And we're very disinterested in building one. Like, we're very disinterested in building one. Like, so if we were to create a violent coup-based revolutionary energy, well, like, so let's say you wanted to do that in the United States. Well, you think if you, like, gathered together all your Antifa buddies and you stormed the halls of power and you actually took it, and let's say you had enough public support so that you actually got the support, and let's say the military let you do it or whatever. Like, let's say maybe aspects of the military joined in and it was actually a full coup. You're telling me that the southern states are just going to be like, okay, cool, we're ruled by Antifa now? No. Like, no, no. Because there's no sense of class consciousness in the society, right? That the divides that exist in our culture or civilization, if you want to call it that, are along identity politics lines and are along tribal lines or along Democrat-Republican lines. And the idea that we are a mass of poor, a proletariat, who is being oppressed by a bourgeoisie, it's just not really part of the conversation. And they're not letting that idea get to the table. Right? What are you guys talking about? Yeah, let the free market decide, except when it comes to fossil fuel companies. They need handouts. Yeah, and Harper, Trudeau has been worse than Harper on this. Harper actually wanted, like, he didn't really play ball with the fossil fuel industry. He if you look at his tenure, he really was like, no, I'm a free market capitalist. Go, it's free market. Let the free market decide. Like, that's what he was saying to the fossil fuel companies. It's Trudeau and these liberals that are really propping them up, that are really, like, funneling subsidies into their hands. Which isn't to say Harper didn't, like, you know, enforce or reinforce. He didn't, like, go after the subsidies that existed in the fossil fuel companies, but it's not like he was doing what they told him to do, the way that Trudeau does, right? Like people really accused Harper of this, that he was like a fossil fuel toady and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, to a degree, that's somewhat true, but not to the scale that the Trudeau liberals are. Like, the Trudeau liberals are just, like, reading, like, literally just getting policies and like, cue cards from the fossil fuel industry and just reading them and just passing the legislation. Just like, I'd be surprised if they were even reading the legislation that they were passing. The people who hold this system up, wittingly or not, are 3 mortgage payments and credit card debts away from becoming the working class. Yeah. Well, and they don't really realize that they're, like, the idea of there being a middle class, right? That there's a lower class, a middle class, and, like, an upper class, right? That's a really clever way of obfuscating class politics, right? So that you can pretend like you're talking about class when you start talking about the middle class or the upper class or whatever. And then when you actually look at it, you're like, no, these guys are workers, right? Your doctors, lawyers, and engineers, they're workers, right? They just, like, get a little bit more money. So they get a slightly nicer car and, like, they have a nicer house or whatever, right? And then they call themselves, like, upper class, which lets them feel bigger and better than, you know, the other forms of workers, like bus drivers or cops, right? Like, and then I'm in the middle class, so that makes me feel better than the retailers, right? Than construction workers or whatever, right? And it's all a way to obfuscate the reality that we're all workers, right? We're all workers, and there's an ownership class, and we're all working for that ownership class, right? And as long as we allow class politics to be dissolved into this idea that, like, well, at least I'm better off than this guy, right? Like, that's essentially what it is. It's just like a lawyer says, well, I'm better off than that guy. It's like, are you? Like, you spend your whole life working for the capitalist death cult on behalf of these owners who don't participate, don't do anything whatsoever, right? And sure, you get like a nice suit and like a nice car, but your time gets eaten up just like mine, right? Like, that's the attribute that all of the workers share. And it's the attribute that nobody wants discussed, which is that we're all wasting our time. Like, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a construction worker, whether you're a cop, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a grocer, whether you're a librarian, right? Whether you're just like a retailer, right? Whether you're just a cafe worker, all of our time is just being completely wasted. And that's the singular attribute that we all share. And it's all being wasted on this capitalist death cult that's organized to destroy the society such that it exists, and also the species. Like, and if we don't recognize this and start to organize along those lines and start to actually say, yeah, like, you're a doctor and I'm a retailer, but that doesn't mean you're a superior form of life or like a superior person, right? And I'm still deserving of like food and shelter, right? Like, this is what these guys are saying when they're saying, like, you want a burger flipper to make $15 an hour? Well, what you're saying is that person doesn't deserve food and shelter. Like, that is what you're saying. It's like, everybody should have food and shelter. I'm of the opinion that a person who is sitting in a field staring at the stars doing nothing important whatsoever, well, I actually consider that quite important, but I think that person should have access to food and shelter, right? Like, why are we coercing people to work for this system of death? I said it a while ago, the vax is useless because they aren't giving them away to impoverished countries. In a global pandemic, they can't even set aside their capitalism to vax everyone. Yep, absolutely. No, we know that. Like, you've got even Oxfam is saying that now, right? I read an article just yesterday, Matthias, that it was Oxfam, and they were very explicit about that. They literally were just like, the capitalist countries are withholding vaccines and withholding the ability for impoverished countries to vaccinate themselves, and that has already made this pandemic worse and has lengthened its period of time. So, like, that's not even conspiracy shit anymore, right? Like, if you had said that even 6 months ago, you would have got shit on as like an anti-vaxxer. They would have like gone after you. They would have like done all this kind of stuff. Yabba yabba yabba. But like, but now you've got Oxfam saying it, right? Like, so this whole like pointing the finger and blaming people who refuse to get vaccinated, right? It's starting to fall apart, right? You're even having like Hill Times, right? Which is a conservative paper. Cowardly Canadian leaders point fingers at the unvaccinated, right? Like, you're starting to see opinion pieces coming out. Let's just dump down to the. What is clear is that government authorities have no clue how to deal with the pandemic, which has gotten new life, pun intended, with Omicron. For months, we have been told that the vaccine would bring us back to normal, and then Omicron happened. With decision makers like these, it's a wonder we have a healthcare system at all. Erica Ithil is a co-host of the Bad and Bitchy podcast. That's a pretty bad and bitchy thing to say, Erica, so I'm down. I'm down with the sickness. But, like, the pushback is starting. That it's no longer, like, these points that used to be considered, like, kind of anti-vaxxer type stuff are now becoming more centrist and more kind of accepted because people see that it's the truth. I think that's a net positive generally, because people need to get to the point where they're abandoning these dumb fucks as fast as possible. Literally, people who watch a few YouTube videos can debunk a neoclassical economists who have PhDs. Well, I mean, it isn't hard to debunk people who aren't rooted in reality. Like, that's really what it is. That, like, you watch, like, these, like, Harvard and Berkeley and Oxford and all these guys, they've put their lectures up. You can go watch them. I have, right? And they all start the same way. Here's supply, here's demand, right? When these two meet, and then they create equilibrium, right? And if you raise the supply, or if you raise the demand, it lowers the supply. Like, it's all supply and demand stuff, which is accurate. Like, that is actually accurate, right? Which is why they start with it. But they don't actually start about defining what an economy is. They don't start by defining what money is. They don't actually even define what, like, commodities are, right? They just supply and demand and all this kind of stuff. And then as you move forward, it just starts to fade into, like, geopolitical trade, and everything becomes about reinforcing their religious ideology, which at this point is, if you give all the money to rich people, then that will trickle down, right? And so and what's hilarious is that they actually, you'll watch some of these videos and they're starting to get pushback from their own students, because the reality is that the students know more than they do, right? Because because religious ideologies are the death of thought, right? That this is what the scientific community has been saying of religions for a long time now. I think it was Daniel Dennett. He was just like, a religious ideology, right, is the death of thought. That if you believe you have found the answer, then you don't actually need to continue pursuing or actually expanding your knowledge. And that's exactly where these economists are, right? They think they've got it. Like, literally, these guys are talking about how this is the end of civilization. Like, this is the end of civilization. Like, this is the end of history. That's the one I'm looking for. Like, these guys are literally talking about how, like, this is the end of history, right? We've grown as much as we can grow and we've stopped. Like, this is what they have argued, right? And if you're saying that this is the end of history, then you don't need to learn anything. You don't need to know anything. You don't need to be literate in your own subject, right? You don't need to read critiques. You don't need to do any of this kind of stuff. It's just give money to rich people. That's the solution, and that's the end of history. Like, and these guys are, and like, it's getting embarrassing for them, right? It's getting really, really embarrassing for them. Like, you watch some of these guys go and have conversation with, like, people like Richard Wolff, even people like Mark Blyth, right? And Mark Blyth is really interesting to watch have conversations with some of these economists, because he's not going out of his way to try to embarrass these guys, but he does every time, because they're embarrassing. Like, their ideology is a failure that doesn't work. Like, and when you actually find a real economist who's interested in reality and facts and knowledge and, like, learning and growth, like, it's easy to embarrass these guys, and you just sort of accidentally dunk on them, you know? And it's all the universities can produce anymore. Like, that's the worst part, right? It's all the universities are producing. So you have a few people, right? You have a few people like Mark Blyth, like Richard Wolff, like, I always forget this guy's name. I can't believe I forget this guy's name. The guy who's he talks with a bit of a lisp, not Zizek. He's an economist. He's always on the moderate rebels. He's the guy who first got me talking about how the financial system is a parasite, right? And he uses the term parasticization. Like, fuck, that annoys me. But he is great. He is great. And it annoys me that I always forget his name. And one of you guys is going to say it. Yet their only concern is attaching a price tag to the pandemic because, you know, worship money. Money is what matters, right? Sure, guys, human life, right? Human life and breathable air and water and workable land and living in a stable society where things can actually be good and having a future and having hopes and dreams and being able to put something into the society and believing that you can build and grow and that this realm of reality is actually worth putting your effort into so you don't fade into escapism. But money. That's literally the argument. They literally say that in front of you. Chrystia Freeland has argued this. Justin Trudeau has argued this. Right? Sure, guys. Stable life. Living in a world that makes sense and is stable. But money for billionaires, guys. The thing we created and invented and that we could destroy in a second if we wanted to and no one would care. These two are equal. Come on, guys. These are equal, right? Like, this is what they are saying to your face. And we're all just supposed to be like, I guess that's true. I guess the thing we invented that doesn't actually matter at all is the same as air. On the news today, John Tory was talking about having a crisis response teams that aren't cops. I actually thought it was a good idea until I heard it's a pilot. Why just a pilot? Because you can't get anything done in this society unless it's like you've got to remember that it's about controlling dissent. That, like, the capitalists have to see that there is an upswing of anti-capitalist sentiment. Like, they see it. Like, you'd have to be clueless not to see it, right? And so you create systems. So you listen to what they're saying, right? And you go, oh, okay, what a great idea, right? Absolutely. Let's go along with this idea, fellow socialists. It's like that meme, right? Like where where what's his name? The old guy is like wearing kids' clothes, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing, fellow kids?" Right? Like, and it's like, "Hey, how you doing, fellow socialists?" Right? And they take your idea, and they go like, "Okay, cool, like great idea. Let's do a pilot." And this is a stall tactic, right? It's a stall tactic to be like, "Okay, cool. So we'll put in this pilot. It'll be a 4-year pilot." And oopsie-doo. Oh no, a change in government. Oopsie-doo. Now the pilot collapsed. Oopsie-doo. And then he like turns and winks at the other politician because they know that this is the plan, right? This is the guy that does the cuts. This is the guy that manages, right? Liberals are managers. Conservatives are cutters, right? One's got the whip, the other's got the carrot, and then they go, oopsie, and then they just blame the conservative. Oh, that conservative, that's my ally and I work with. Oh, that conservative, they're the real problem, the guy that I work with and who we're partners with in this system. And then they just talk that game, and then should it come back, and then when the liberal seizes power again, it's not like they're seizing power and going, okay, let's get back to that pilot. Let's go back to that pilot, guys. Let's get that going again. They're just like... And if it just fades out, and if the populace loses the energy, and if it just fades out, because it's been 4 years, right, and people have had to like restructure their lives and actually deal with the trauma of being abused in the way that the capitalist death cult abuses us, and that if that energy doesn't come back, the liberal is just like, oh, okay, I guess everything's fine. This is the strategy. They've done it with the basic income. That's what they're doing, and John Tory's doing it with this. Right? And, big shock, he's doing it in a year that he's going to get ousted. Right? Oh, look at me, I actually care. Look, here's the pilot project. Oh, I'm out of office. Bye, everybody. Guess that pilot project's gone. Like, it's a strategy. And YouTube didn't say you're live. Yeah, they're gonna be like that, bud. And diversity is strength. Even the United States military says this. That if you have units that are full of diversity, then they have to actually get to know one another in real ways, and they can't make assumptions about one another. And so they learn more about one another, which increases cohesion, right? That if you have a unit that is, let's say you have a squad of 4 dudes, and all of them are from the same town, right? Well, then there's kind of an assumption of communication, right? Or if they're all from the same state, well, then there's just a series of assumptions that happen. And so they exist in kind of a shorthand. And so they don't actually communicate with one another. They don't actually talk with one another. They just sort of move forward assuming that everybody understands what's going on because they're all from the same place and they kind of speak the same language. And it's not like they like suddenly collapse or something, right? But they're not as cohesive and they don't work as well as a group of people who are from very different places with very different backgrounds, because these people actually have to go through the struggle of learning one another and learning how one another speaks and learning how one another talks and ensuring that they are all on equal footing and on the same page with one another, right? Which they do because they all understand that they're going into a life or death situation. And when the bullets start to fly, the guy beside you is the only thing that matters, right? And so those squads end up being more effective because of the need to increase the level of communication between members. And that's not a theory, by the way. That's the United States Army itself stating that is their observation of their own squads and their own people. So diversity is strength. I think it's a pilot since once you make major social, it's usually a good idea to have fail-safe checks, balances to correct problems as they come up. I mean, that's sort of the argument of a pilot, right? But the reality is it's a stall tactic. It's a way for the political class to look at you and be like, look, we're actually doing something, while simultaneously creating a long-term plan to dismantle it, right? Like they did with basic incomes throughout the 70s, like they're currently doing, right? Like if the populace is willing to accept a pilot, right, Well, why would you push forward? And then it gets even worse because you have a large segment of the population. Like, I literally have talked to people whose expectations of basic incomes are like, oh, this pilot project happened and there's all this evidence, but we don't know what it looks like on a large scale. And I'm not comfortable passing it unless it's done on a larger scale. And then you're like, oh, so you're not interested in passing the legislation unless it's done on a larger scale. But it can't be done on a larger scale because you're not interested in passing the legislation unless it's actually done on a larger scale. So literally what they're arguing for is, I need to see the basic income done before I'm willing to implement the basic income. Like, and that is an argument that is put forward against the basic income movement. So it's like it's a catch-22. Like, they've built a catch-22 into it. And that's what these pilot projects are. They're just a way to stop the growth while pretending like you're actually interested in being part of it. Doctors are petty bourgeoisie as they don't exploit others. Yeah, I mean, you get into like petty, what is petty bourgeoisie, but bourgeoisie and all that kind of stuff. And I find that like that sort of depends on the societies that you live in, right? Like, it's important to remember that like Lenin and Mao and these guys were fighting against monarchs. We're fighting against like kings, right? Like, that's extremely important to understand, that they were not faced up against this structure of a society. They were not faced up against like a faux democratic structure that exists to reinforce an oligarchy, right? It's a different structure that in a different culture at a different time. And so, like, are the doctors petty bourgeoisie? Like, they look like they're working to me. Like, they look like they're going somewhere and it looks like they're doing something valuable to me, right? Like, so I can understand how doctors in, like, a medieval society who are, like, literally walking around being like, you need to be leeched. There are ghosts in your blood. You should do cocaine about it, right? Like, yeah, seems pretty petty bourgeoisie to me. But, like, I have been in these facilities. Like, remember, I was in funeral services, right? I have been in these hospitals. I have delivered car crash victims to a hospital and witnessed doctors and nurses and staff attempting to save the life of a car crash victim, right? Looks like work to me. Just putting that out there. Looks like work to me. Differences in ability don't necessitate hierarchy. Well, and I'm more or less of the opinion of like the hierarchies that exist in our society seem more or less created. Like, they just seem like false. That like, and the whole idea of like a meritocracy seems like a false hierarchy in the first place. Like, that the hierarchies that exist in our society that pretend to have a certain degree of legitimacy seem to be like the democratic system. Right? That like there's a prime minister and then there are people under the prime minister and all that. But even that structure is kind of questionable, given that it was erected by a queen, right? It was erected by a monarchical system in order to maintain control of the colonies. Like, that's the reason our system exists. And like, when we declared our independence from the crown, all the power sort of just diffused into the office of the prime minister. But the structure of the system is to just diffuse public opinion. That's the role of the democratic system. It isn't to facilitate the demands of the people. It isn't to work on behalf of the people. It's to maintain control on behalf of the wealthy class. Like it always has been. It was designed that way. My shamisen instructor. I don't know what shamisen is, bud. Shamisen. Is that like shaman? Are you a shaman, dude? Are you, like, learning how to be a shaman? I hope so. Get some fucking magic. Let's go. Right? Anyway, my shamisen instructor went on a rant last night about how we're not giving vaccines to poor countries and are not acting with compassion. For sure. Absolutely. Hey, Eric, how you doing, bud? Your anti-vax take makes me question... Michael Hudson! Or, I haven't heard of Martin Bordur, so I'll look into him. But Michael Hudson, yeah, absolutely. You guys, I knew it. not even after 4 years of economic studies at the university define any of this. Yeah. Like, they're not interested in defining that. Like, what is an economy? What we keep saying, like, oh no, the economy, you're going to kill the economy. Okay, what is an economy? Right? And I have never seen one of these neoliberal economists define it. Because if you actually defined it, if you actually talked about what an economy is to students, right, they would be like, oh, this is fucking bullshit. Like, the whole structure of the system is total fucking nonsense, right? And this is why you have sort of the infusion of, like, the real economy, right? You see this all the time. People talk about the real economy, right? Like, what the fuck? Like, how is it that you have an economy, but then there's also this real economy, right? It's a tacit admission that there's such a thing as a fake economy, right? And then when you actually try to break down, okay, well, what's the real economy? What's the fake economy? Well, the fake economy, and Michael Hudson's the guy to look to for this, by the way. The fake economy is the parasites. It's the financial system. It's the stock market, right? They're just shuffling numbers around. There's no real growth. There's nothing actually happening, right? And then what's the real economy? Well, building shit, making sure people have food, right? Like things that are real, making sure people have houses, right? Things that are real and tangible and material. And in America, the real economy is shrinking and the fake economy is growing. Can't imagine why the whole thing's collapsing, right? Can't imagine. And then when you talk about improving the real quality of life for people, they start to say, like, oh no, the economy. And then you go, like, are you talking about the real economy or the fake economy? Right? Because I'm completely fine if the fake economy collapses. Like, I'm completely fine if the fake economy collapses. I don't give a shit about the stock market. I don't give a shit about, like, the financial sector. Like, it's fake. It's not real. Just because you're investing all your time and effort in it doesn't mean that it's real or that it's doing anything important, right? I took money and I put it into Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin increased in value, and then I sold it, and now I have more money. Helpful, right? That's helpful, right? Like, you did something tangible and real. You improved the world in a meaningful way? No, you didn't. I took my money and I bought the franc with it, and the franc went up, and so I transferred it over to the ruble, and then the ruble went up, and so I bought some renminbi, and then that went up, and then I transferred it back into dollars, and I made a pretty penny. Useful, right? That's a useful, helpful thing that actually built something. No, it's meaningless. It's meaningless. You're literally just transferring money around in a system that doesn't exist in the first place. It's completely worthless. And there's a reason why the universities cannot teach this. Because they know that if they start teaching it, the students will rebel. Right? That the populace will actually go, this is entirely bullshit, and dismantle it. Because it is. It is total bullshit. Like, and so you can't actually teach the truth. So you've got to teach a narrative that reinforces the death cult. You've got to teach a narrative that says the death cult is good. The fake economy that doesn't exist is important, right? And so that means that you can't actually define terms, and you can't actually be serious as an intellectual or as a scientist or anything. You're just a priest, like an acolyte. All it gets in advanced level is to get to the math behind their model, yet my professor flat out admitted their math is all made up numbers. Well, there's this, like, really powerful story that nobody knows about, of course, because they don't report on it. But back in, like, the 90s, right, like the late 90s, some grad student for their, like, PhD thesis was like, I'm going to go through the numbers that they used to justify trickle-down economics, supply-side economics, voodoo economics, right? I'm just going to go through those numbers. And as he went through them, he was just like, oh, there are, like, multiple errors. Like, straight-up errors. Not like their conclusion was wrong or not this, but literally, like, 1 + 1 = 8, right? Like, errors. And he found that those errors collapsed the model, right? So, literally, the numbers that they're using to justify the model don't work. So the system fails. It's designed to fail because at the end of the day, it's not about building a stable system. It's about extracting wealth. That's what it's about. And as soon as you realize that it's about wealth extraction, then you recognize that all of the people who are involved in the process are frauds. right? And they are frauds. Like, they're very strictly frauds. They're illiterates. They don't actually know anything about the subject. And which is why now that, like, and there are true believers. Like, there are people who are true believers, just like there are people who truly believe that Jesus Christ is coming back, right? There are people who believe that trickle-down economics should actually work. And now that it's failing, and it's obviously failing, right? You've got these guys, and they don't know how to respond. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say, right? So they keep coming up with nonsense because they refuse to read and become literate in the subject. They're certainly not reading Marx, right? They're barely reading people like Piketty, right? Like, and they're not reading Keynes or any of this shit. It's all just like Friedman and Sowell. That's all they care about. And so they're illiterate rubes who don't know anything about the subject in the first place. I love that. When I was an angry atheist, I would tell the fundamentalists that the religion was the death of progress. God created the universe? Well, that's it then, huh? Yeah, like, you don't need to learn anything if you just, like, and really that is what you're doing. You're just being like, God created the universe. Oh, okay. Like, great. Well, how? What was the toolkit? What was the toolkit? I can even post a YouTube channel where the entire undergrad and grad course of economics can be found, and it's purely statistical and math that supports it. I like Giannis as well. Yeah, I'm not. I was talking about Hudson, but Giannis is great too. Giannis is the guy that brought forward that has brought forward the idea of techno-feudalism. I was calling it neo-feudalism, but I like his term better. Techno-feudalism seems to be more accurate. Look how much everyone dying is costing us. How dare they inconvenience our stakeholders? Well, and then my favorite is now they're turning around and they're blaming us for not having kids. Like, literally, they've erected a death cult based on a false ideology and the worship of money. And they're complaining that people who they don't pay, whose quality of life is in significant decline, are not having future slaves, basically. Like, this is how embarrassing the conversation has become. Capitalists don't mind people dying in the street, except they have to pay to clean up the bodies. Yeah, exactly. Won't someone please think of the stakeholders? Yeah, military training inherently relies on not you, us, because you gets the squad kill, whereas us aids in survival. Exactly, bud. The Marines kick me people out. Well, they try, anyway. The goal of the petty bourgeoisie is to acquire capital themselves so they can exploit their fellow workers. They may have to be a small property owner. Yeah, that's right. Thank you for clarifying that, Mock. That's a good estimation. Like, and the petty bourgeoisie often rises to the defense of the true bourgeoisie because they have a vision or a dream of themselves becoming the bourgeoisie, right? Like that I own a store, and so I'm the same as Jeff Bezos, right? Like, the trajectory of me becoming Jeff Bezos, it's there, I can see it, right? The connective tissue is real. And they don't recognize that, like, the system will abandon them too, ultimately, right? And that's why it's so important for these conservatives to defend the small business owners, right? That's the petty bourgeoisie, right? Because they've got to keep the petty bourgeoisie on side. Right? They got to keep these people on side, keep voting for the capitalist system, just keep driving, just keep going in, just keep sacrificing your whole life. You too will be Jeff Bezos one day, right? Like, work harder, sacrifice more. You too, or maybe your kid, right? If you got kind of a legacy thing, will attain the heights and shoot himself into space one day too. It's dumb. If doctors didn't have to help the poor, there would be no Hippocratic Oath. Yeah. Shamisen is the Japanese banjo. Nice, bro. Oh, that's actually really nice. Is that the? You know what, man? Let's go, Brandon. Shamisen. Show me this thing, man. Let's go. Oh yeah, it's exactly what I thought, bro. I'm hyped for you, man. How far along are you? Like, for real, how far along are you? Shamisen. I'm hyped for you, man. Super hyped for you. I'm gonna turn this down a little bit, but I'm gonna keep talking. If doctors didn't have to put, yeah, like, share, subscribe, hit all the bells, hit all the whistles, give me money, all this stuff, you know. The fire sector, only in stocks can you sell them without a buyer first. They're automatically sold, and boom, 500 million. Have a good one, Alex. Oh, you're gone, and I'm talking about this. Hello. Can you post the thesis? I would love to read. Oh, dude, I don't have that at my fingertips. I don't want to. I'll put it in the Discord. I'll look around for it later. God's mouth spoke the universe into existence. Yeah. Hey, Daniel, I remember you from last year. Good to see you, Dan. Under globalism, trickle-down theory skips the American working class in favor of cheap labor in the developing world. Yeah. Giannis was interviewed by David Bakeman. He straight up told him that social democracy will not happen. Yeah. No, it's not in the cards, right? Like, social democracy can only arise in the face of communist revolution. That is the truism, right? There is a reason why people keep talking about Finland. There's a reason why people keep looking at like the Scandinavian countries, right? But the Scandinavian countries, the reason why they erect these social democratic systems is because their neighbors are undergoing a communist revolution, and people within the culture are going like, hey, we also too could have a communist revolution. And so the capitalists in response go, oh, no, we don't need to have a communist revolution. No, we'll give you better health care. We'll give you some days off. Yeah, we'll ease your burden a little bit. We'll make things easier for you. Oh, you care about climate change? Yeah, pollution, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. Just whatever you do, make sure that we have the means of production. We'll give you everything you need. No, and that's social democracy. And the only way that happens, like, that doesn't happen because you're like, I'd like social democracy, please. Vote vote liberal. I'll get social democracy that way. Social democracy arises as an alternative concession from the capitalist class in the face of communist revolution. That's what it is. All right, let's get rid of this. All right, Harry, you're reminding us. Thank you so much. I didn't actually do the number draw, so let's pop into it. Do the number draw. Finland, which was part of the Russian Empire before the Russian Civil War, went through its own civil war against communists in 1918. Thank you, Mocked, for that trivia fact. Always useful, right?
Here we go for today's number.
Here we go.
It's January 19, 2022. 10 balls. Each ball has a number.
I'm feeling like a 2.
Numbers 1 through 10.
I might go get some strings tomorrow, guys, so my guitar will be back up and running. Swirl the numbers. Dude, I hope it's an 8. You guys have doubled down, tripled down on the 8. I hope it's an 8. Come on, 8. Let's go.
Today's number is 10.
Should have gone big. I went 2. Oh, Carrie joined me with the 2. No, 10. Big 10 today. Whiffed. We all whiffed. We weren't thinking big enough. That's what it was. We were all just like, 8. 8, right? Giving something a 10, right? Like, if it's a 10 out of 10, like, boy howdy. Like, that's a tough number to attain, right? Like, if something is a scale from 1 to 10... I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, how would I give something a 10? Like, a 10 would need to like literally change my life. Like, that's what it would be. Quick, privatize the ball picking. Exactly. Well, technically it is privatized, isn't it? It's just David Lynch. Like, he could just not do it. It's not like he's mandated by the state to do it. All right. Thank you, Grinning. Yeah, please make sure, guys, you like, share, and subscribe it. Let's get rid of this. I should have done this when Alex was in the chat. Alex has started the Municipal Socialist Alliance. This is a public group. He's attempting to organize participating in the municipal elections in the Greater Toronto Area under a banner of Municipal Socialist Alliance. So, this is something I'm sharing just to let you guys know that there are people in this group and in this organization. Alex is one of them. He is the fellow who showed me this. He wanted me to talk about it, and he wanted me to share it with you. I completely forgot to do it while he was here, of course. But I'll let him know that I did just that. And people are organizing. And this is a great way to organize, right? Organizing locally. Trying to get more people involved, right? Becoming the leader in your own community. We are too spread out. That's the problem with what we're doing now. Like the project as it stands right now, right, is advancing, is growing, but it's important to acknowledge the realities of where we stand. And the reality of where we stand now as a group and as a people is that we're too spread out, right? So Alex has taken it upon himself, as I encourage each and every one of you to do, to create an organization and to be part of a movement that is focused on local level politics and involving yourself in local level politics, because that's where things are actually going to advance, right? That's where things can actually become more meaningful and more powerful. And as much as I shit on our electoral system and the electoral politics and the hurdles that exist there, I will not denigrate people who want to pursue that. I think it's pursuing every angle. It's pursuing every angle. Because my goal is to galvanize people to the streets. But if suddenly there was a person who actually was in a position of power internally and the streets were surrounded, they'll be more malleable. They'll be more on side, right? So I can see the benefit either way. And again, as always, I tell you guys every single time, I'm not a fundamentalist, right? I'm not standing here being like, electoral politics is a failure and people who involve themselves are fools. Like, I don't know. What's the future? I don't know. I can't see the future, right? I can look at other historical communist uprisings and be like, okay, well, what worked and what was successful? But I also have to acknowledge that those communist uprisings occurred in cultures that are not ours, that in societies that are not structured the way our society is structured, right? That the communist uprising in China, the communist uprising in the Soviet Union were against fucking kings, right? That's not what's happening right now. And so if there was a communist uprising that occurred in this nation, it's going to have a different quality. It's just going to have a different quality. And there's no guarantee of like I genuinely don't think that we're going to be able to walk up to like the table and just throw up the table and then suddenly be communists, right? Like the culture is not about that. It's just not about that. And like, we're not there yet, and we're not like that. Yeah, like too many people really are, and like the whole concept. There's a reason why the far right is the ones talking about free speech, because the far right understands that when communists come into power, like this is what the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie is about. That the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and they call it a dictatorship because they understand that they're explicitly removing far-right reactionaries from the conversation. That far-right reactionaries are delegitimized entirely in the political apparatus and the political structure. They're literally not allowed to talk, right? That's why like the Nazis and the far-right are all about free speech, because they understand, like, there are cultures that exist, major cultures, China, where, no, like, a guy like Jack Ma, like, if Jack Ma is found to have spent money on a political candidate in order to influence his position, in China that's called corruption. And it's a punishable offense, right? It can get you removed from a party. You can actually be arrested for it, right? And the far right's well aware of it. That's the reason why they're the ones that are banging on the free speech thing. And that loops in liberals because it sounds all very flowery, but the reality is that it's just let the psychopaths keep talking, right? Like, I have $1 billion and I'm a psychopath. I should definitely be able to talk in the society, right? Whereas a guy like me, I'm like, no. Like, I'm completely fine with that. I'm completely fine with the idea of the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and I'm completely fine with the idea that psychopaths attempting to manipulate the population should not be permitted to speak in the society. I'm actually fine with that. And I don't see it as a free speech issue, because having the conversation be dominated by psychopaths is not freedom. Right? Like, true freedom comes when the weak are able to speak and have their positions actually enacted, right? And actually focused on and paid attention to, right? Like, what free speech is in this society is overwhelm the weak with this psychopathic nonsense. And the whole conversation we're having is completely psychopathic. Should people even have food and shelter? Like, oh, okay. Like, yikes. But again, here is an example of somebody who is actually moving forward in the electoral system, is attempting to engage in electoral politics, and I encourage each and every one of you to do the same. And then if suddenly we're all on the streets, maybe you'll be in the boardroom, right? Who knows? So, again, I'm not a prophet. I don't know what the future holds, but glad to see that Alex has taken this upon himself. Good for you, Alex. I just wish you were in the chat when I realized that I hadn't been reporting on this. I'm gonna keep this open, and I'm gonna talk to him about that more. I already talked about that. I'm somewhat debating to try to run for politics locally. I kind of created my it is a bullet point of what I want to see happen. I actually kind of want your opinion on it. Feel free to share, Eric. Feel free to share. If you're in the Discord, just put it in the Discord, bud. Here's the article that I wanted to read today, because I actually found this to be very, very interesting, right? China not interested in becoming world's #1 economy or global hegemony, says Vice Foreign Minister. China should pay more attention to surpassing the United States in terms of improving people's lives and contributing positively to the world, rather than pursuing the goal of becoming the world's #1 economy, said the country's vice foreign minister on Tuesday. Li Yusheng made the comments a day after China published its 2021 gross domestic product growth figure of 8.1%, beating expectations and moving its economy closer to the size of that of the U.S. Exceeding the U.S. in GDP, we are not interested in it, and this is not what we are going after, he told a forum held by the Xiangyang Institute for Financial Studies at the Renmin University of China in Beijing. To meet the people's desire for a better life, this is what the Communist Party of China aims for. The World Bank estimated the U.S. economy grew by 5.6% last year. That meant the Chinese economy was likely to have been 80% of its size, up from 70% 1 year earlier, according to the South China Morning Post calculations. When asked whether China would become the next superpower, Li said the country was not pursuing global hegemony. We should oppose the Cold War mentality of unilateralism, interference in internal affairs, making coterie and group politics, he said. Bilateral tensions between the U.S. and China have escalated in recent months, despite a virtual summit between President Xi Jinping and U.S. counterpart Joe Biden that tried to find a way to improve ties. Experts said the two nations have reached a stalemate in trade talks. U.S.-China relations face great difficulties, but responsibility lay with Washington, Li said. The crux of the problem lies in the U.S.'s wrong China policy, wrong understanding of China, wrong views of the times and world, he said at the forum. China and the U.S. should not play a boxing game. We should play a track and field competition. That is to say, to win the game and the future by becoming a better self. A report issued by the Xiangyang Institute on Monday urged the U.S. to turn its China economic policy from decoupling to recoupling, separate from politics, which would allow a wide range of cooperation from pandemic control to infrastructure construction. China's annual per capita GDP rose to 12,551 in 2021, approaching the high income threshold of 12,696 defined by the World Bank in 2020. Despite China's better than expected growth last year, Beijing is on high alert for economic headwinds, including a shrinking population, a property sector slowdown, and local government debt. Many analysts have warned the annual growth rate is likely to slow to 5 to 5.5% in 2022. It was previously thought China's economy would become the world's largest by around 2030. But Yao Yang, dean of Peking University's National School of Development, said it could happen between 2028 and 30, citing China's growth momentum. The Economist said China's GDP would likely be twice the size of the US's by 2049. You want me to link this article, bud? Here you go. Here you go, bud. Boom. Boom. I like this. This is my favorite part of the whole article, which is it shouldn't be a boxing match. That it should be more like a track and field match where we're competing to improve oneself. That we're not trying to defeat someone. That's not what defines victory. That the definition of victory is getting past the mark more effectively and better. That it's about, like, you think about like high jumpers, right? Well, it's pretty clear who's the best high jumper. It's the person who jumps the highest. Like, period, right? But you don't jump the highest by stepping on the back of your opponent, right? You jump the highest by working to jump the highest. Like, and so I like, if you're going to talk about, if we're going to use the classical sort of sports analogies, right? I like this. I like this a lot better. Yeah, exactly. The modern concept of GDP was created by Simon Kuznets, who warned against its use. Yeah. I remember reading this like a decade ago, and I wish I had have held on to that article, because I've never been able to find it again. I've never been able to find like where Kuznets actually warned against its use in the way that we're using it. And I forget really why he felt that he should create this measure if he felt it shouldn't be used in this way. Right? Like, well, what way did he want it to be used? But it does imply that we should deprioritize it. Like, it shouldn't be like the thing. It seems like GDP is like the fucking thing these days. And it's like, boy, do I wish we would get over it. I wish we would get over it. All right, what's going on here? All right, let's take a look. Let's take a look. We're doing it in real time, Eric. Is it coming? Washington, Washington. 8 feet tall, fucking killing for fun. Ba-bum-ba-bum. All right, here we go. My political platform if I'm elected premier. UBI. Everyone gets $2,000 a month until X amount, and then it reduces 10% for every X amount above. Maybe define X, but that's good. All debt forgiveness, doesn't matter if student loan, mortgage, every 7 years. Yes, debt jubilee. Debt jubilee. Debt jubilee. Debt jubilee. Fuck these capitalists. Debt jubilee. Debt jubilee. Turn grocery stores into a single payer where people can get food for free and housing. You just get food for free. Food and housing for free. Yeah, I mean, like, for fuck's sake, like, absolutely. Like, maybe reword this, but yeah. Fulfill the 40-year promise to make a true universal health care. Love it, love it. Strengthen union powers towards employers. Give business subsidies to the people who want to turn their workplace into a worker co-op or start businesses. Yeah, absolutely. Abolish the FTP. Abolish the with FTP bringing a mixed proportion. Oh, yeah. The first past the post, right? And bring in a mixed proportion system. I actually do have something, like, my brother, who's been in politics his whole life, has the opinion that it doesn't matter. That it's about engagement. That's what really matters, right? That he actually believes that you can mess with the system in terms of first past the post, mixed proportional, all you want. But what actually matters at the end of the day are whether or not people are engaging, right? And so and I worry that people spend a lot of energy on this issue when it's maybe not as important as people think it is. That like if the culture decided to just become communist and everybody was actually a communist and we overwhelmed the system with communism, well, although the first past the post system does allow, and I can show that even in this chat right now, it does allow the classic gotta vote liberal or the conservative will get in, right? Which you see right here, right? Vote splitting amongst the Liberals NDP, allowing the Tories to go up the middle, says pollster, right? So this is step one. Oh, the left is vote splitting again. They gotta pick one, right? And people get skittish. Gotta vote liberal or else the conservative will get in. That's step two, right? It'd be nice to live in a system where that stupid narrative didn't exist. But at the end of the day, it is more about actual participation. Anyway, which isn't to say that you shouldn't have this on your platform, because I think it actually does play. And I think there are people who really like it. Give unconditional support to the Aboriginal, listen to their recommendations. Yeah, truth and reconciliation, right? Truth and reconciliation. Absolutely. These are great. Do it. I believe in you. I believe in you, Eric. Man, it's about getting out there and shaking those hands and kissing those babies. That's what you got to do. Hey guys, did you hear? Earth's sixth mass extinction event has begun, according to scientists. Isn't that great? Right? Isn't it great? Boy, howdy. A study from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature found that hundreds of land animals could go extinct in the next 20 years. It's no secret that extinctions have been happening at an alarming rate in recent decades with human involvement and climate change, blamed for creating habitats unsuitable for many species of wildlife. Even more worrying is the findings of a major study by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, Red List, the Threatened Species and BirdLife International, which found that the Earth may be on the brink of a mass extinction event. Worldwide, it is thought that more than 500 species of land animal are close to extinction and could be lost within the next 20 years. The report was published in the scientific journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences and studied 29,000 species of land vertebrae. They estimated that the number of extinctions expected in the next 2 decades would likely take thousands of years, if not for the negative impact of humanity. What is mass extinction? Scientists estimate that 99% of all living organisms that have ever lived on Earth are now extinct. The planet's natural ecosystem is constantly evolving. As the environment changes, certain older species will begin to fade away. However, there are some points in the Earth's history where the gradual evolution has become more of a sudden revolution, and a majority of the planet's living species are wiped out in a relatively short space of time. In the last 500 million years, there have been 5 occasions when 75 to 90% of all species have gone extinct, in what is called a mass extinction. It should be remembered that the short period of time is described in geological terms, dating back across the vast period of time since the start of the Earth. With this in mind, Earth.org explains that a mass extinction event can take anything up to 2.8 million years. So let's pump the brakes on like the hysteria a little bit, which is why I'm kind of reading this quite candidly, because like mass extinction event, 2.8 million years. Come on. Why should we be worried about mass extinction? Important question. There have been at least 5 other instances of mass extinction, so the threat of a 6th may not seem too distressing. However, scientists estimate that this one could occur in a time frame unlike many of the previous mass extinctions. Rather than taking millions of years, we are seeing sweeping changes during the course of a single human lifetime. So ringing that bell. Data collected as part of the IUCN's report shows that 77 of the species who are most in danger have lost 94% of their populations in the last century. More than 400 species of vertebrate became extinct in the last 100 years, a figure that would take around 10,000 years to reach in the normal course of evolution. This all points to a series of extinctions in the near future, which could have a catastrophic resultant effect on the natural ecosystem. The IUCN's analysis shows that 388 species of land vertebrates had populations of less than 5,000, and that 84% are primarily found in regions where other species have a population of less than 1,000. Experts warn that extinction breeds extinction, as species reliant on life forms that become extinct also suffer as a consequence. Like, this is how powerful capitalism is, right? In a very short period of time, it's threatening an extinction event, right? Hey, garden mice, how you doing? And it is a scary feedback loop. There are many scary feedback loops built within the ecosystem, right? That, like, the warming system, right? That there comes a point where the thing starts to loop in and on itself, and it becomes uncontrollable and unmanageable. And, but this is how impressive the death cult is, right? It's very impressive what the death cult is doing. It's destroying, it's creating a mass extinction event with its high levels of efficiency, right? It's efficiently destroying the species. Like, that's what they're talking about when they're talking about efficiency, right? When they're talking about, like, cutting red tape and all of this. Right? Cut red tape, right? Efficiently destroy the species. Cut red tape to protect the species. Just let chaos reign, right? Let the free market decide. The trouble with that is it turns out we're suicidal, right? Right? Nobody thought about that. Everybody just sort of assumed that we would have like a base survival instinct. Nope. Turns out we're a suicidal death cult. Uh-oh. God, it's so fucking dumb, eh? Like, it's so fucking absurd. Like I feel like I'm being very candid about it right now, and I feel like I should be reporting on this with some gravitas, but it's just getting so, like, you know, like if the comet were to hit and the wave of destruction were to, like, overwhelm me and wipe me out, I just feel like there would be kind of a feeling of, like, oh yeah, fuck, thank God, let's go, Brandon, right? Like it's just so fucking dumb now. Like, it's getting beyond dumb, and we're just, like, we just don't care. Like, really. Like, we just don't care. We just keep going to work. We keep voting liberal or conservative. We keep voting Republican or Democrat, right? We keep just investing into this dead system. We don't pay any attention to reality, right? We literally are experts call the destruction of the species an externality. That's literally what they call it. That environmental destruction and degradation, which is leading to the destruction of the species, is an externality, right? That we were talking earlier about how these economists are frauds, and they are. They're total frauds, right? And that's one of the major, like, they genuinely do not care about the survival of the species. They call it an externality. Like, what more evidence do you need that these people are total frauds and that you're part of a death cult? You want to go get it, buddy? I got a ball. My Milo is looking at me. Okay, buddy. Go get it. Good boy, buddy. Where'd that ball go? It went into one of my shoes. He's never going to find it. I don't have it, buddy. Where'd it go? Yeah, he's dead certain I have it. Guys, I need to set up a camera, like, right here, so that you get, like, the Milo view, so you can see what Milo is doing this whole time, right? I think that would play really well, actually, if I had, like, a second camera set, like, probably right there, so it could look into the room, and, like, then you would get Milo, like, going around and being Milo. Have the Milo cam. Yeah, economists scare me, man. Yeah, of course they do, right? They're such frauds. And I keep saying it over and over again, that, like, even if we cleared these frauds out, right behind them would be the frauds that they have trained, right? And so, like, we're having like an institutional crisis where the institutions themselves are incapable of responding rationally to this. And if we wanted to respond rationally to this, we would literally need to erect new entire systems, new entire institutions. Like, we literally need to start from square one while simultaneously eradicating these old systems. Bum, bum, bum. I feel like that's what's like, that should be the sound effect that's used. Like, let's say an extinction event just sweeps through and like humanity is wiped out, right? Like, I feel like if we were to make a film version of this, it would be done with like violins and the cellos, and like there'd be like a big brass sound. It'd be like the tragedy of the human species. Whereas I'm just more like, nah, it should be like a fart noise with like the sound of losing a game on The Price is Right. Just like... That's it. Humanity, dude. What a faff. What a fucking faff. And like, you see the projection. There's an enormous amount of projection going on in the conversation. So here's Scott Adams, right? Famously writes Dilbert, right? We all love Dilbert, right? Who doesn't love Dilbert? Here he is on Twitter. Name a major problem in the US that is not caused by China. So just xenophobic nonsense right off the top, right? Name a major problem in our country that isn't actually the fault of a country on the other side of the planet. Like, that's just outright xenophobic. Like, you don't need to think very hard or far. You should animate that. I should clip that is what I should do. Send that around. That'd make a really great TikTok or a YouTube short. It's harder than you think. They gave us pandemic, fentanyl, economic destruction of the U.S. middle class, climate change, racial unrest in America. Imagine actually believing that it is China's responsibility for the racial unrest that exists in America. Like, the projection is real. It's so real. The military budget, yeah, it's China's fault that the military budget acts this way. Yeah, North Korea, like I don't even know what he means with like North Korea. Like, what are you talking about? But it's like, when you have people in the conversation who are so unwilling to self-reflect, right? This is the crisis of what is going on in North America, is that we refuse to actually self-reflect and self-analyze. And so we literally have no self-image, right? And while simultaneously walking around pretending like we're the best. So we're delusional by definition. And you see it in statements like this is deluded. Like, you've got to be living in la la land to say shit like this, right? Like, the problems that exist in your own country are the fault of a country on the other side of the planet that is not connected to your country in like real or meaningful ways. Like, yikes, bud. Like, yikes. And it's just a way to externalize your problems. You never need to look at yourself. You never need to pay attention to what's going on inside of yourself. And so in many ways, Scott Adams is becoming the idiot boss in his own comics, right? That his claim to fame is like creating this idiot boss that everybody hates, right? And the idiot boss is like clueless and keeps providing delusional shit. And Dilbert always like speaks back to the boss, and the boss is always a moron. Well, Scott Adams is that boss, right? That's the sort of hysterical irony of Scott Adams' life, is that he becomes his own creation. And that creation isn't Dilbert. It's his idiot boss. Yes, China causes American police violence. Definitely not cognitive dissonance. Exactly. If it wasn't for China assisting the DPRK, the U.S. would have had another neo-colony. Exactly. No, exactly. Like, what was by what right did the United States have to interfere in that country, right? Like, the United States basically just interfered with that country and split it in two. Like, that's what happened. Yeah, if that person claims to be the prophet of God, but no one ever has that claim, ever claimed that constitutional right, yeah. Yeah. We're facing crisis of climate, public health, and democracy, but people talking about living in video game with techno money. Peak escapism, because solving the real problems is hard and not profitable. Yeah. Like, and like, straight up, like, the right wing talks this way. They're like, oh, the left keeps talking about this stuff, but they don't realize how difficult it would be. And it's like, yeah, we do, actually. We do actually realize how difficult it would be, but we believe that we should do it anyway. Right? Like, oh, no, it's hard, and so, like, the snowflakes don't want to participate. Like, that's literally what it is. It's so hilarious to me that it became popularized that the left wing were the snowflakes. When... like, no one is more snowflakey than these conservatives. Like, there is no one more snowflakey and precious. Like, they're so precious, right? It's exactly that accuse other people for for that which you are guilty of yourself, right? And so they accuse us of being snowflakes, and we're like, bro, like, you can't handle, like, a moderate, like, reform to your society without screaming communism. Like, who's the fucking snowflake? And it's just like... what are your thoughts on other internet lefties like Vosh? Vosh isn't really a lefty in my view. Like, I think Vosh is a liberal. As I listen to Vosh more and more, like, for example, Vosh has a reputation for sort of being pro-pedophilia, but the more I investigate that, the more I see that it's a misunderstanding. That he really... in the early days of his internet career, walked into some weeds and made some bad arguments, not to say that he was in favor of pedophilia, but that he was using pedophilia as a way to debate something, and he just made an idiot of himself. And so this reputation kind of comes through. But there is also a lot of odd commentary that surrounds Vosh, and a lot of stuff that he says to people, and he talks to people in comment sections and stuff, that I'm a bit like I give him a sideways look all the time. Also, he straight out admitted being a CIA snitch during the Occupy movement. So, like he straight out admitted that. I also think he's got, like, a lot of shock jockism, right? And at the end of the day, right, but at the end of the day, my general opinion of most internet leftists at this stage in the game is they aren't trying to galvanize people into the streets. They're more interested in their business than they are in the movement. That's the final statement, right? That, like, if you like Vosh, great, fine. Like, that's fine. But in my view, it's just entertainment television, right? Like Jackson Hinkle, he's starting to get on the upswing, and he's starting to make some headway. But near as I can tell, he's just entertainment television, right? And it's just another confirmation bias system that, like, there are people on the left who want their bias confirmed, and so men like Vosh or Hassan or Kyle Kalinske are willing to do that, but they're not going to actually move people into the streets or galvanize a genuine political movement, right? And it really does come down to the reality that, like, these guys are more interested in their business, they're more interested in their bottom line than they are in a political movement. Like, and that's just the truth. And, like, someone like Vosh is, like, commenting on the culture. Kyle Kalinske has sort of put himself forward and has made gains as, like, a news reporter type. Jackson Hinkle is essentially gossip television, right? But the gossip television is about leftists talking to one another, right? Yes, that's pretty correct, mocked. Yeah, from my understanding, Vosh made the comparison to buying a T-shirt to buying child porn to argue that if the T-shirt is legal, why isn't the child porn? Yeah, instead of if the child porn is illegal, etc. Yeah, like no, that it was a misframing of the argument, and I feel like that's really what got him in a lot of hot water. And he's even gone so far to make videos to clarify this specific point. And to admit that he framed it badly and all that. And I think that's respectable. I don't think you should ever hold it against a person if they get into the weeds and they fuck up and they make a mistake and then they try to go back and rectify it and acknowledge their mistakes. I think that's fine. Right? I think that's fine. But like, I don't know, like in like Vosh to me is as important as like Rush Limbaugh, right? He's not really trying to create a political movement. He's not really trying to push anything forward. He's happy with his business model. So do you think if these internet leftists did more praxis, they would be better? Oh, Eziel's got an opposing position, which I'm happy to hear it. Truth be told, I don't know that much about Vosh. Straight up. I don't find him interesting. Like, that's really what it comes down to. Because he's not actually really involving himself in genuine, like, political movement or anything like this. Like, I don't particularly find him to be very interesting. So, I don't know that much about him. Truth be told. And, like, nor do I think he is actually a genuine debater, right? Like anytime somebody shows me a video of Vosh trying to debate someone, I just like, it just, this is what I do the whole time. I just find myself doing this face, just like, like, can you just let the guy make his point? Can you just talk? Can you just like, and I also find that like Vosh wants clicks. Vosh wants clicks, and so he just says stuff to get clicks. The Professor Flowers drama really showed me his true colors. See, this is what I'm talking about, right? Like, even listen to that phrase. Like, really even listen to this phrase. The Professor Flowers drama really showed me his true colors. And I'm just like, I don't really care. I don't really care to invest too much energy into this character. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to build a movement to get people galvanized in the street and take over the halls of power and surround the halls of power. Like, that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm explicit about it. And if there are people who want to be political commentators and all this kind of stuff, or want to be social commentators and all that, that's all great for them, right? But, like, are you getting into the streets? Are you platforming people who are going into the streets? Are you, like, what's the goal here? What's the goal here? And the critique that I have, and I have the same critique for David Dole, I've got the same critique for Vosh, Kyle Kulinski, Hassan, all of these guys. All of them. They're not actually getting into the streets. They're not actually politically impactful. Right? They're not supporting a political impact. They're trying to make a living. That's it. That's it. Vosh supports the 1930s Germany banking conspiracy. Oh yes, like the Jews own the banks. Right. Yeah, I don't know. I've just never heard him say much of anything that is interesting, well thought. Like, and in many ways, I find that his takes. So, for example, he had a take on the dictatorship of the proletariat, which, in my view, was. It wasn't a misunderstanding of the dictatorship of the proletariat, but it certainly was presenting the dictatorship and the proletariat in a way that would be the most acceptable and the most consumable to a capitalist audience, right? Like, the purpose and the goal of the dictatorship of the proletariat is to exclude reactionary right capitalists from the conversation completely, right? Like, just completely. And that's not really what Vosh presents, and because I don't necessarily think Vosh is incentivized to be particularly honest about any of this stuff. just kind of another guy that's sort of like Tim Pool, who just like regurgitates what he thinks his base will say, and he just looks to get clicks. Like, I remember when Vosh, when it came to the a conversation of Julian Assange, like he literally said that I hope they kill Julian Assange just to piss off people on Twitter, and it's just like. That's not really a serious commentator in my perspective, right? And that's the kind of thing that you take so that you clip it and then you spread it around social media so that people will be like, I can't believe he said that, right? So in that way, Vosh is more like Howard Stern, right? That he wants people to hate watch him, right? That if someone's watching me and they hate me, they're still watching me. And I think Vosh is aware that he does that, and I think he knows that he operates that way. And it's fine if you're interested in building a business, which is all he's interested in, right? He's not genuinely interested in a political movement. And so the people in this chat, and myself included, right, as we grow and as we move and as we get more connected to the political apparatus, men like Vosh will talk about us. And we will not talk about Vosh, because Vosh, in the end, is not that important. That's really what it comes down to. He's not very important. His perspective's not very interesting. He's got a nice voice. I think he presents himself well, and I think he also has the benefit of being on the ground floor, right? He was one of the first people to really get into doing what I'm doing now. Well, he was doing it 10 years ago. So he was on the ground floor. In the same way that Kyle Kulinski, right? Kyle Kulinski did, it's the same thing. And they pushed into this idea and this thing before it was really well understood that someone could actually make their living doing this, right? And so he has that benefit. And it's good timing for him. It's good timing for him, for sure. Just like Joe Rogan, right? Joe Rogan also benefits from that. Being the first guy to really commit and do this. Right? Back when nobody thought anybody, who gives a shit about this? What are you talking about? You're just going to sit around and talk to people? Pfft, no one's going to watch that. And now it's the most watched thing. So I think that Vosh and Kulinski and all these guys benefit from that. But at the end of the day, as time moves forward, they'll fade into their little niche, right? They'll be seen more like a Howard Stern style figure. Right, they'll still do it, and they'll still have a base, and they'll still be listened to, and all that, like Howard Stern is, right? But they're not particularly politically important, in my perspective. I want to report on what's going on in the world. I want to talk about theory. I want to talk about how do we actually deal with these crises? What do we actually do about it? Whereas Vosh is kind of just a sideshow, and Kulinski's just kind of interested in his business. Which isn't to say that Kulinski especially, I think, is useful, because he's more of he's a genuine reporter, right? He's here's the story, and I think you should know about it. And what Kulinski really highlights is usually very important. And I also think that Kulinski is actually interested in the truth, which I think gives him a leg up. Vosh isn't really interested in the truth. He doesn't really care about that. He cares about how to get people to watch his shit. That's all he cares about. Kulinski, I think, cares about the truth. And I think that way about David Dole as well. That while I think that both of those guys are essentially just liberal socialists, right? They're right on that line, right? Where they can kind of tip over into socialism. They're talking about democratic socialism, but they don't really understand that democratic socialism isn't really it doesn't just manifest, right? That democratic socialism is a result to a rising communist movement. That's how democratic socialism spreads. And they don't understand that because they don't read the theory and they don't know anything about it. So they're a liberal that's sort of trying to emerge into a kind of socialism, right? But they don't know how to get there, and they don't understand how to get there. And because they're still in that kind of liberalistic dynamic, they're permitted in the conversation more, right? Kalinske especially, who has like kind of ascended to a level now where he's in what's like crystal ball, and not to say that crystal ball is like establishment or anything, but he's inoffensive to the establishment is maybe a way to really put it forward. That like someone like Kalinske and someone like David Dole would very much like they would be quite pleased with attaining a certain level of power within the political apparatus themselves in order to just commit to piecemeal reformism. And it's just not what I'm doing. It's just not what I'm doing or what I'm interested in. Which isn't to say these guys are bad, right? And again, like I actually do find David Dole and Kyle Kalinske to be interesting because they actually report on things, right? And they're reporting on things in a way that is in this kind of I am interested in the pursuit of truth sort of way. Whereas I kind of look at other leftists and I see a lot of jockism. Like Hassan. Hassan is just, he's there to shit on Shapiro and Crowder. That's what he does, right? He really is just like a gossip television sort of a guy. You know? He's not really that interested in a movement or in a meaningful conversation about what's going on in the society. So, and again, these guys could change my mind in a minute. They could change my mind in exactly 1 minute, and it would be as simple as this. A clip of them saying, hey guys, I'm going to X place at X time. You should all come and we should protest. And I would immediately be like, boom, bibbity bobbity. Off to the races. Here we go. We've got a legitimate political movement, right? Because, like, the capitalists aren't afraid of you if all you're going to do is sit in your apartment and bitch, right? Like, the capitalists are not afraid of you if all you're going to do is grumble. Like that, and that's basically the leftist movement that exists, such that it exists in North America. Just a bunch of guys sitting around grumbling, right? Which right now, that is all I'm doing, because it's snowy and cold. But come the spring, we're going to kick the protests back off, right? And there will be more protests, for sure there will, right? The Extinction Rebellion is for sure going to kick back up. The climate change, the climate survival movement is going to kick back up. The anti-vax movement for sure is going to kick up again, right? And we're going to have our own anti-poverty movement, right? Like we'll just keep plugging away at it. And again, it's not to say that these guys are bad. I just think that they're more interested in their business than they are in the movement, and they don't know what to do about it. I think is the big thing. Vosh is one of those white liberals who are contemptuous of POC who don't agree with the pro-West views, and he's influencing thousands, if not millions. Oh yeah, and definitely Vosh is pro-imperialist, right? That's for sure the truth. Like, this is why, like, Vosh isn't really a leftist. Like, he's pro-imperialist. I think at the end of the day that I should have maybe led with that. I don't know why I bury that about Vosh, but it's definitely the truth. Like, he's pro-imperialist. Like, he thinks that American imperialism is good. Right? And he's willing to kind of wiggle around on it, but like at the end of the day, if the US goes into a country, blows it up, steals its resources, foments a coup, he's like, great, let's go, Brandon, right? Have a good one, Garden Mice. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Anyway, I don't want to go too much deeper on those guys because like I want to talk about myself. goddammit. I'm here to talk about me. And here's an interesting question, though. And you're seeing it coming out, right? I truly wonder how much longer America can hold out before it just collapses. Jobs are paying $30K, houses are $300K, food is getting more expensive, student debt is killing us, gentrification is making people homeless, rent is sky high. Like, how much longer can this last? Right? Like, that's the question. How much longer can this last? And what happens amidst all of this? What happens amidst all of this? Like, it becomes this... Like, I see it happening in the city of Toronto already. That the city of Toronto is beginning to hollow out. People can't afford the rent. There are no jobs. The jobs that do exist are not paying enough to cover the rent. And so people are in flight mode. and they're fleeing. And so what this leads you with is it leads you with a hollow city. And then on top of that, because of the spike of homelessness, the city is going through and removing public infrastructure, benches, real simple stuff, right? So people can't sleep on the benches, or people can't congregate around these things, and they're installing hostile infrastructure. And like, how much longer can it go this way before the people themselves begin to abandon the system back? Right? Like, this is why I say that a violent revolution wouldn't work, right? Not just because of the blowback from the United States military, right? But because even if you did achieve your goals, right, the society is not structured to be able to withstand it. Yeah, you want to exist comfortably, pay the city hall fee of $100 or you freeze. Exactly, right? Like, no, exactly. Like, it's the society is not structured around reality. The society is structured around a false ideology. And that ideology is very simply the worship of money, or what's called the profit motive, right? Like, and once you understand this, like once you understand that this is a religious ideology that's not based in reality, that has its own internal logic, that externalizes all things that contravene its ideology, well, you know it's going to collapse, because it has to, because reality itself will collapse it, right? Like, we talk about a mass extinction event. Well, I guess the reason why I'm so candid about this idea of a mass extinction event is that it's just more believable to me that reality will destroy capitalism before it destroys itself, right? That we do tend to get into this, like, hysterical, like, the world is going to destroy itself, or the planet will be destroyed. The planet's not going to be destroyed, guys. Like, the planet's fine. Like, really. Like, when you actually zoom it all out and you look at the scale of the crisis that we represent to the planet, we're like a bad case of hives, you know? Like, it's not great for the planet, certainly, but we're not threatening its death, right? And it will definitely, like, it pays to remember that these capitalist systems are weak. They're extremely fragile, right? Like, they're extremely fragile. And it's far more likely that as things... we're herpes. that it's far more likely that as things continue and as reality asserts itself, that the system of capital will be destroyed first. Because humanity is more resilient than capitalism, right? And will it be chaotic? Will it be tumultuous? Will there be insane, crazy events? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. But the human spirit and the human consciousness is stronger than capital. That capital relies on illusion. Capital relies on propaganda. Capitalism relies on obfuscation and myth-making, right? But just like in the story The Wizard of Oz, right? Once the curtain was pulled back and you saw that it was just a man, right? Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Well, the wizardry was gone, wasn't it? All of the pomp and all of the power and all of that kind of stuff was gone. And the same will be true of capitalism. And humanity will continue forward, and humanity will deal with the consequences as they happen. But this idea that we are going to be obliterated as a species while capitalism somehow persists, I just don't see it that way. And that isn't to say we shouldn't struggle, and that isn't to say that it is an inevitability, and that isn't to say, like, our investment in the overthrow of the capitalist system is going to facilitate the overthrow of the capitalist system. But more importantly will be our investment in other systems, our investment in our own communities and in our neighbors, in our local politics and in our municipal politics, right? That's going to have more of an impact because the capitalist system retreats, right? It abandons, right? And it's already abandoned huge swaths of like the American Midwest and the southern states, right? Like these people are experiencing systems of abandonment. Like they have been abandoned. And they're attempting to deal with that. And the way that we have to deal with that is on the one-to-one level and on the local kind of a level. And we have to believe, and I do believe, that humanity will overcome the death of capitalism as reality kills capitalism itself. It is very much like we are watching two gods go to war with one another. And that's what makes it so scary and uncertain, because we want to believe that we can do something, and we want to believe that we are the author of our own fate. Like it's a very fine myth to say, but the reality is capitalism is a force unto itself, and so is reality. And we will watch these two gods go to war, and it's pretty obvious which one will win. Like it's the capitalism is not so powerful that it can defeat the forces of reality. So so our task, in my view, as we are fomenting this revolutionary moment, is to ensure that as the capitalists abandon us and retreat from governance and control and all of that kind of stuff, that we at least attempt to erect other systems to ensure that we are cared for on a one-to-one basis, on a local level. It's a question of when and will nature toss everything up too. I mean, there is that. Like, it's very possible that we just get into like a methane like fueled feedback loop and the temperatures just spike up and then the sun bakes us. That's totally possible. But all we can do in the face of that is just stop polluting, right? Like stop this madness. And really, like, there is like a supervillain-esque level on this, eh? Like someone like Jeff Bezos, like as the society and as the capitalist system abandons us, right? We are going to be attempting to organize ourselves on the local level. Well, Bezos is going to keep shooting rockets at space, right? So he's like a fucking supervillain. He's just going to be off in the corner, just shooting these fucking rockets into space, going to war with reality, right? And we're all just going to be like, you should stop. And he's going to be like, I'm going to help, right? I'm building a better future, because he's crazed. He's lost connection to reality itself. And so he's inadvertently going to war with reality. And reality is going to have some stuff to say about that. You ever ask yourself if aliens really did come in 10K BC, but instead of lasers, they introduced liberalism? No, I don't like this alien narrative. Can we stop polluting entirely? No, that's crazy. Like, and nor should we present like that's not realistic. Humans are pollution. Like we pollute for sure, but there's a balance, right? And we are very, very well out of balance. Also, James, I don't know if you've been here before, so good to see you. I'm glad to see that you're asking questions and contributing. That's wonderful. Yeah, we can't stop polluting entirely, right? Like, you really think about what that would take for us to completely stop polluting. Like, you're talking about like a return to literally just like chill out in the jungle and eat bugs and shit, Like, we're sure we could do it technically, but we're not going to. We're not going to. People aren't going to stop using these technologies. Like, we're not going to stop using computers. We're not going to stop using electronics. We're not going to stop doing any of that. But we definitely could scale it back. And more importantly, right, we know who's doing the most polluting. We know where most of the pollution is coming from, right? And it isn't coming from people using handheld devices and using computers. Like, technically, yes, that does pollute. It's not even coming from, like, people driving cars back and forth from work, right? Yes, that pollutes. Like, absolutely, that does. But the bulk of our pollution, the mass of our pollution, is coming from private jets, fucking shooting rockets at space, the United States military, right? Like, these are the primary sources of pollution. It's this narrative that says it's up to the individual in order to prevent their own pollution. Well, every single time Bezos shoots one rocket into space, it is the same level of pollution as 100 billion people's entire lifetime of pollution. All right? I gotta say this again so that it really drills into people's heads. Every single time Bezos shoots a rocket into space, one rocket is the equivalent of 100 billion people, their pollution throughout their entire lives. So this concept that, oh, well, you just need to stop, like, just bike to work instead of driving to work, right? Like, and if everybody did that, that'll solve the problem. No, because as long as Bezos is shooting those rockets into space, we're still in the middle of a climate catastrophe, right? And so in very serious ways, guys, we are talking about supervillainy, right? We are genuinely talking about supervillainy. That, like, if everybody on the planet stopped polluting, literally turned off their electronic devices, turned off the fossil fuel turned everything off, the coal plants, everything, literally everything. We started all growing our own food so that they didn't even need to transport food to us. Like, literally everyone sacrificed their entire lives to stop polluting and created not only a zero level footprint, like not only no carbon footprint, but also started to improve it, started to do things, plant trees. If every individual acted this way, we would still be in a climate crisis because Bezos is shooting rockets into space and the United States military is moving its shit around. Like, we know who is responsible for this. Ooh. Jeff Bezos will put, hold on. I'm willing to be corrected on this point. The United States military still, though. Today, put 3. Okay. In terms given in the case, carbon dioxide isn't emitted. The Guardian cited how the Russian billionaires could dump massive amount of greenhouse gases. Hold on, this is interesting, actually. Oh, that didn't apply to specifically this. This looks like they're trying to technicality their way out of it. Oh no, the one rocket we shot the one time doesn't do this. Yeah, other private companies, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Richard Branson, use conventional fuels and do release carbon dioxide, right? The Blue Origin flight isn't net zero for the environment, whether it's water vapor, blah, blah, blah. Both degrade the ozone, right? So, you see how they try to wiggle out of it, right? You see how they try to, like, technicality their way out of it. Anyway. That doesn't make these rides risk-free. They do pose a threat to the ozone layer. So they're still, like, polluting. They're still doing the damage. It's just technically, that's what this is. Anyway. No, and I'm happy. I'm happy you're asking for citations, dude. I don't have these things at my fingertips, but is it the Guardian newspaper? Right. Again, like, you can search around for this shit, and so PolitiFact is like, oh, but technically, and then of course here's their sources, right? And it is good to dive deeper into this stuff, right? And honestly, finding this article is really interesting because they've provided all these sources and are also simultaneously concluding, like, they do pose a threat to the ozone layer, but technically, it's like science is annoying this way, or it's all technicality. Okay. Anyway. But my point still stands, right? If we all stopped doing this and they kept firing rockets into space, it's still a threat, right? Like, it's still the problem, right? And they're not, like, solving it, right? That their solution literally is just keep shooting rockets up and take all the polluting industry and get it into space. But the process of doing that is going to destroy us, right? The process of doing this is going to destroy us. Like, and just because they made a technology that doesn't technically do, like, the carbon emissions, well, it's still fucking doing damage to the system. It's just doing it in different ways. The new telescope was worth the launch, right? What's your opinion on this? I don't have one. I don't know enough about it. Like, people want to learn shit about space, and so they're putting up telescopes and all this stuff. Okay. I just, I can't have an opinion on everything, James. I'm sure we'll get some cool shit out of it. Like, don't get me wrong. I do worry. Like, I worry that a lot of the times that we get caught in our, fantasies or our dreams, right? Like Elon Musk has a dream of colonizing Mars, and we get caught up in it. And we're willing to, just like in the movie Don't Look Up, right? That there's a fantasy that's presented to us that we can allow the comet to hit Earth, but if we break it up in this way and lower it down safely, it'll actually happen, right? But it's a fantasy, right? And I look at Mars in the same way, that it's just like capturing our imaginations, right? And I worry that things like the telescope and like this sort of stuff, like, it's just sort of capturing our imaginations, but all it's going to do is, like, get some cool pictures. Like, I think about this with the Long Hadron Collider, right? Like, we think this is a good idea? We literally think, like, smashing these particles apart is a good idea? I don't think it's a good idea. Like, I seriously do not think it's a good idea. Like, we don't know what it's going to do. Like, and we certainly don't know if we can control the outcome, right? Like, you're telling me that we're going down to, like, the building blocks of reality and our solution is to just smash it with a hammer? Like, maybe not. Like, maybe fucking not. Right? That is a good technicality. Yeah, technicalities. It's important to acknowledge them, but boy, are they ever annoying. Because someone could take a technicality like that and then be like, aha, this discredits your entire point. And it's like, no, it actually doesn't. Right? It's just a technicality. Like, the larger point still stands, which is that these rockets are doing more damage than the populace is by a lot. It's just, it's not carbon emission versus all, it's just doing well. Although I don't like Musk, at least his spaceship is bringing satellites and space station and but again, I look at this space station stuff, and I'm just like, bro, like, we don't have shit worked out here, like, and you're telling me we're gonna pollute this place so that we can what? Like, it's just like a dream. It's just like a fantasy. Like, we're captured in this scientific vision of our reality. But we haven't acknowledged that part of that scientific vision, like the science fiction vision of our reality, is having a stable planet upon which everything is safe, right? Like, I've never played a video game about space exploration and being a spacefaring people. Like, I love these types of video games, like Civilizations like this, but like you think about games like Masters of Orion, Stellaris, right? Where you're a spacefaring civilization and you're building a civilization that spans across planets. I've never once played one of these video games that had baked into it the idea that as you are going into space, you're also destroying your home world, right? It's just not part of it. It's not part of our vision, but it's part of reality, right? It's part of reality that we can very well destroy our ecosystems and destroy our quality of life and destroy this place while pursuing this vision of being a spacefaring people, right? And I feel like the vision of being a spacefaring people is honest. It's just not rooted in it's not intrinsically rooted in reality. Like, we're not actually doing it with a sense of reality. We're completely happy about the destruction of our civil society and the destruction of the species and the destruction of our ecosystems. If it means we can have, what, a space station? Like, we're going to put like a base on the moon? Like, the Chinese are doing this. The Chinese are trying to get a moon base up and running, right? And like, I'm more or less supportive of the Chinese Communist Party, but I look at that and I go, why? Like, what the fuck? Like, maybe cut back the emissions, guys. Like, maybe let's focus on stabilizing our ecosystems. Let's focus on creating sustainable models, right? But we don't think that way. We don't think that way. We're not interested in sustainability, and in many ways, a sustainable culture, like a culture that is just in balance with its surroundings, in balance with its natural world, it would be considered a failure by capitalist standards, right? Because what's the only thing that capitalists respect is growth, right? That's all they respect, is they respect growth. And it's growth for growth's sake. And if you're living sustainably, and if you're in balance with things, well, then you're not growing, are you? And in capitalist terms, if you're not growing, you're dying. It is said that the moon contains rare earth metals. China most likely try to make sure the U.S. doesn't get a monopoly on it. Can you imagine if we actually start mining the fucking moon? Like, I cannot begin to tell you how stupid I think that is. Like, I cannot begin to tell you how fucking stupid I think it is to start mining the moon. Like, like, the moon affects our tides. The moon affects so much on our planet. And we're just going to start hollowing it out? Sounds like a really fucking bad idea. Sounds like a really fucking stupid idea. Right? Especially, like, and rare earth metals, right? Like, so much of what we're doing is just in this mad pursuit for superpowers. Like, we've opened the Pandora's box, right? Like, it's Prometheus giving fire to man, except this time it's electricity. We have figured out how to harness electricity, and we see that it has granted us godlike superpowers. And now we are being confronted with our own destruction, with our own inability to regulate ourselves, and say to ourselves, there has to be a limit to these superpowers and to our connection to this electric source. And we're incapable of it. And it seems that the closer you get to the source, the more it overtakes you and the more it overwhelms you. And we are sacrificing our survival as a species on the planet for superpowers. It is 100% what we are doing. Like, we can fly now, right? And the next iteration of these superpowers is a personal jetpack, like an Iron Man suit, right? It's not enough that you can go to a place and get on a craft and have that craft shoot you somewhere so that you land somewhere, right? That's not enough, right? Like, now it needs to be your own personal suit that you can just like have in your house. And it's baked into our culture. It's how we envision things. One of the great American superheroes right now, and they're called superheroes, is fucking Tony Stark, who is just literally like a Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk style character who creates technologies for himself. Like, and we worship this. We celebrate this. And as that manifests into our reality asserts itself and says, cute story, bro. Like, cute little narrative, like your Santa Claus or your Jesus Christ. Like, cute little narrative, but I'm reality. I'm the world, right? I am the collection of all things. I am the electricity, and I've got something to say about that. And we don't give a fuck about that at all. Like, we don't give a fuck about that at all. Yeah, Elon Musk had a cameo in Iron Man 2. How cringy, eh? I thought that was so fucking cringy. Like, the Elon Musk worship, the Elon Musk simping is so unbelievable to me. Like, it's like, you talk about, like, the decline of man and, like, the decline of Western civilization. This idea that, like, Elon Musk even wanted a cameo in Iron Man 2. I talk about this all the time on my channel. I worry that you guys are going to get bored about it and tell me to shut the fuck up about it. But, like, this guy has some fucking issues. Like, this guy's got some major fucking issues going on. And I think a lot of it has to do with his dad. Like, he's got some huge daddy issues. Like, his dad was a slaver in South Africa, owned emerald mines, right? Probably not a guy walking around hugging his son, telling him how much he loves him and how proud he is of him, right? Like, probably a piece of shit. And, like, why does Elon Musk want everyone to think he's smart? Right? That's what it was in Iron Man 2. He presented himself in Iron Man 2 as if he was like a genius. That, like, Tony Stark went over to him and was like, oh, it's Elon Musk. Wow, you're so smart. So am I. We're both smart. Right? Like, and I've seen Elon Musk, like, get on magazines and be called the real life Tony Stark. Right? And it's like his brand. His brand is being like a super intelligent genius. And you have people like Jordan Peterson calling him like a billionaire genius and all this kind of stuff. Elon Musk has never invented anything in his life. He's never invented a goddamn thing. What he does is he takes his money, he tells other people to invent shit, and then he buys the rights to be called the founder or the inventor of the thing that someone else invented. It doesn't take a fucking genius to do this, right? It's not even that clever or that smart, right? Like, he's literally just paying for the rights to take credit for other people's shit. Like, you're not a genius. That's not smart. And the question really becomes, why in the fuck does he need to convince anybody that he's smart? Right? Isn't it enough that he's like the wealthiest man who is like at the top of this like tech situation where he has control over thousands of people's careers, and he's constantly trying to push forward for like space or like any of this kind of stuff. But he keeps funding these absolute failed ideas, like that fucking Hyperloop, like all this kind of, where he like reinvents transit systems but worse, you know, like this kind of just fucking nonsense that is what happens when someone doesn't have anybody around them who's willing to say no to their stupid, shitty ideas. Like, these ideas are stupid and shitty. And they fail and they suck. Even when they're executed perfectly. Like, even when they're... Like, the fucking Hyperloop is, like, literally, like, cars underground. So instead of, like, a rail, like a subway, right? It's like, drive cars underground. It's like... So even if it works, it sucks. I listened to a thing on Goalcast where they argue he is a genius because he set impossible goal, like shooting a rocket with a car on it. That's so fucking stupid. Yeah, I want a car on a let's put a car on a rocket and shoot it, because that's never happened before. They never put a rover on the moon. That's never happened. Like, the guy is just doing shit that we've already done. And we're all supposed to be like, oh, wow, he did something that we already did. Ooh, he's such a genius. The thing we already did. Like, Musk has never, he's innovated nothing. He's done nothing important, right? He's taking ideas that have already existed and claiming them as his own and paying people to sign like non-disclosure agreements so that they won't stand up in public and say, yeah, I actually invented that. Like, Elon Musk didn't invent electric cars. Like, that's fucking dumb. And the biggest abomination of the whole thing is that his company's name is Tesla, and if you were to actually put Elon Musk in the space at the same time, I know, buddy, Tesla. If you were to put Elon Musk in the same space as Tesla at the same time, well, Tesla would be more like Edison was, which was a fraud who stole every invention he ever invented, right? Edison played the same game that Musk is currently playing, right? And this is American entrepreneurialism, right? That Musk would hate Tesla because Tesla was actually an inventor who actually invented things, and B, wanted those inventions to proliferate and for people to have access to them for the betterment of humanity. Whereas Musk is putting up fucking tweets like, we'll coup who we want, while fomenting a coup in Bolivia so he can get access to lithium mines. Ugh. No, he didn't even start it. Exactly. He just claims it. He owns a South African slave emerald mine. He bought Tesla, kicked the original guy out. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. Did you say anything about re-education? Don't think so, dude. We get so fucking caught up in this vision of what humanity could be that we're spending exactly no time whatsoever having an extremely basic conversation about how things are. What is reality like? What is reality asserting? And why do we keep listening to people who continuously externalize reality, right? Like, oh yeah, it's completely fine to destroy that and pollute it. That's just an externality. Yeah, it's just an externality. Don't worry about it. That doesn't affect the internal system that actually matters, right? Our fake economy money is what matters. The environment, that's an externality. You don't need to pay any attention to that. Get completely fucked, man. Like, get completely fucked. There's a reason our culture or civilization such that it exists is in decline. And it's just because we refuse to acknowledge reality. And we refuse to acknowledge even our own history, for God's sakes. Like, take a look at how hard the states are working to make sure that the history of America is not actually taught to children. Right? Like, we don't want to talk about reality. We're not interested. We want to fade into our fake version of history. That the founding fathers are worthy of our praise. They certainly weren't just lords who didn't want to pay taxes to a monarch anymore and wanted to live in a land where they could own slaves freely without concern of taxation from the crown, right? Like, nope. People aren't warm enough? Build a man a fire and he's warm for the night. Set a man afire and he's warm for the rest of his life. Exactly, Grinning. You are technically correct. The best kind of correct. Fucking technicalities. And trying to build dual power in one of his videos, he was able to intercept 11k pound of egg that was meant to be destroyed. Weird. Oh, what do you think about him? He's an... What are we saying here? What do you think about him? He's an anarchist who discusses what his leftist should do. He talks about Antifa and other topics. He's also got real action. I don't know. I don't know who you're... I don't know who you're talking about, first of all. Are you talking about... Is re-education... Yeah, who you're talking about, dude. I don't know who you're talking about. And, sounds cool to me. Like... I really like there are TikTokers and YouTubers who do what you're talking about. They do dumpster diving, and then they take the food that they find, and they'll find hundreds of pounds. They'll find tons of shit, right? And then they'll take the food that they find and they make meals for their community. And I'm like, that's fucking baller. Like that's fucking baller. Like that's a real leftist. Right? It's not Hassan, it's not Vosh, it's not Kalinsky. It's these people who are diving into dumpsters, finding like 200 pounds of cherries, and then cleaning them and then making something out of them so that they can distribute it into the populace. Like, that's a fucking leftist. Re-education. Oh, okay. I'll take a look at it, bud. I know, buddy. I know. Peanut butter, right? Peanut butter. Here, hold on 1 second, guys. I'm just going to see if my dog... Is there more peanut butter in there? Do you need peanut butter? I know. Oh, there is a little peanut butter in here, buddy. Here. You can go at it that way. Little guy. Living with a pug, man. It's like living with a living cartoon character. Ugh. Shooting star spotted by homeless person wishing for food. Actually billionaire going to space for fun. On point. On point. What if the great resignation is the collective masses realizing all at once that we're burning out for nothing? Right? Right? This is the reason why I still pay attention to the anti-work subreddit, even though they banned me for being a communist. Is that people are creating simple explanation, or not explanations, but simple expressions. Right? That the abandonment of the society is becoming obvious. The Great Resignation is essentially the culture and essentially the working class abandoning the ruling class back. Right? That the ruling class has abandoned us, and so we're abandoning them back. And it's being done, like, and the ruling class's commentary on it is like this kind of like head scratching, like, why is everyone quitting? After we fucking abandon them and destroy them, shit on them, lie to them, like, do everything we can to call them shitty and denigrate them, actively argue that we should destroy stability for the working class like Alan Greenspan did. Like, I can't imagine what's going on. Right? 1 million people hungry, needing the fruit, and kerosene sprayed over the gold mounds. Yeah, what kills me is when they throw the food away and then hire security guards to protect people from dumpster diving and getting the food. Like, that's where it gets, like, gross, right? Like, throwing away the food in the first place, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I mean, you're a big organization, and you're going to have a certain degree of waste, and waste is definitely part of the system. And, like, if I wanted to be, like, the Ben Shapiro nerd about it, where it's like, you know, when you have an organization that's this big, you know, you're going to have waste in the system, and if you have waste in the system, you know, you got to expect that there's a certain degree of food that's going to be thrown away. But then they turn around and, like, literally hire cops to keep people from dumpster diving on it. And it's just, like, it's indefensible in every single way that you could possibly imagine it, right? Like, that's no longer like, oh, the company has a certain degree of waste, and what are you going to do, right? Like, that's literally, like, oppression. Like, that's oppressive bullshit right there. And the reason why they do it is because they know if they give that food away, well, that's going to cut into their margin. Like, we are getting to a point now where, like, food prices should actually be considerably lower than they are. Like, if you actually gave a shit about supply and demand, right? If you actually gave a shit about, like, well, supply's like this, demand's like this, and it meets in there, and if you add more supply, well, the demand doesn't go up, and that lowers all that kind of stuff, right? So if free food is disseminated into the populace, that means demand for food goes down, but your supply remains the same. That means the price should go down, right? Like, that's fucking supply and demand economics. And so they can't let people have free food. Like, we should fucking nationalize the food distribution network, right? Like, tell Galen Weston, tell these guys who own these big box stores to thank you for your service. Now it's time to please fuck off, right? Go the fuck away, right? And we should make food as cheap as it possibly can be, right? We should subsidize this shit. Like, I don't understand this. Like, why are we trying to convince the populace that everyone should have access to food and shelter? Like, why is it? How did we get to this point? The fertile earth, the straight tree rows, the sturdy trunks, and the ripe fruit. And children dying of pellagra must die because a profit cannot be taken from an orange. Steinbeck. I worked at Walmart during closing and in the morning. You have no idea how many food is being thrown away every single day. Every baked good that they made that day wasn't sold. They throw it. Yeah. No, it's the built-in waste and grotesque wastefulness of capitalism, right? Like, they don't care because what matters is the money. Yep, $13.20 for a single steak. Yeah, like, and this shit's just gonna get worse. Like, it's just gonna get worse as the wealth extraction program moves forward, because eventually there's just gonna be people. There's going to be entire states and entire, like, municipal organizations that just won't have money, right? The money will have been extracted out of their society. And so the organizations that, like the grocers, will just stop existing. They'll just stop sending food there, because why send food to a place that has no money? Because what matters more than feeding people is money. And if you've extracted all of the money out of the area, well, then fuck them, right? And they're just completely left to fend for themselves. And you'll have, like, the mom and pop, like the petty bourgeoisie guy who sets up, like, the little grocery store and has, like, some real basics. Like, that'll get set up. But chances are good that for that person to operate, given the system as it stands, his prices will have to be high, right? That's how it's going to work. And it's like we're turning back into a society where we're just going to have, like, ghost towns, right? Where entire cities, like the city of Detroit, are just, like, gutted and hollowed out, right? Like, it's just like a country that is going to be, in terms of the human infrastructure, a wasteland, with, like, a couple of cities that'll be like these glittering icons. And of course, we'll just, like, keep talking about how awesome these cities are, because that's what we do, while denigrating the people who don't live in the cities. I heard a story where someone returned $300 worth of pasta. The reason they returned was that the organization who got the pasta was left over for some potluck. Oh, yeah. Oh, this is interesting. This is actually really interesting. Poland's President Duda has told the media it's no longer in Poland's interests to continue criticizing China simply to please the Americans, right? As I've pointed out over and over again, the conflict that's going on in Ukraine is happening over the Belt and Road Initiative going through from Moscow to Belarus. And Poland is, of course, right there, shares a border with Ukraine, no less, and is pretty familiar with far-right fascism and Nazism, especially the type that's being fomented in Ukraine by NATO. But the Belt and Road Initiative runs from Minsk to Warsaw, right? So it's Moscow, Minsk, Warsaw. And Poland, for a while, I can see why it would be willing to go along with the Americans. But now that Poland's trade is starting to connect more to the Belt and Road Initiative, it's starting to pivot towards China more. Well, they're starting to be like, well, wait, why are we siding with NATO? Like, why are we siding with the Americans? Like, what are the Americans actually bringing to the table? Because in my view, it looks like what the Americans are bringing to the table are Nazis, right? Whereas what China seems to be bringing to the table is trade goods and a more equitable alliance structure, right? Like trade and peace and stability. So Nazis, stability. Tough question to ask. Tough question to ask. Left for Spotlight, they wanted their money back. The response was simply, yeah, throw every single bag away, yeah. Yeah, the whole charity front is pure BS. No, of course it is. Like, it's total nonsense. And a lot of, like, Walmart's charity is just taking money that's donated from the consumer base, right? Just take the money that the consumers donate, because they ask at the till, right? And then turn around and use that money. But don't cut into your own profit margin. The profit motive only produces enough to meet about 80% of the needs. 20% of the people won't be able to pay enough to pay the profit takers. In the US, if you have a nonprofit, you can apply to a lot of businesses to get their leftovers. I worked with Panera all the time when I was in the church. That's excellent. No, and that should be done. Absolutely. But I'm saying it should be structural, right? Like, you shouldn't rely on some individual nonprofit to actually do that. That should be baked into the system. Like, that should be an automatic feature of our system. And but it's important to remember, like, in terms of the profit motive, right? The capitalist class abandons 10% of the society structurally. That they want there to be a certain degree of unemployment. They want a certain degree of problems in the society for people. Because if everybody's needs were taken care of, then they can't coerce people, right? Like, so they have to keep a certain amount of the population desperate. And that's just built in, right? So, and the reason for it is that protects the profit motive. Like, when I heard this, like, this was explicitly told to me. Like, capitalists told me about this when I was 12. And I was like, that's evil. Like, I knew it instantly. I was like, that sounds fucking evil. Like, you're abandoning your fellow citizens so that you can protect your profit motive? Like, that's vicious. Like, that's fucking vicious. Yes, that's correct, Grinning. You're right about that. Not disagreeing with you about structural versus individual, just that we can make a difference under the capitalist hell world. Well, and in many ways, what you are espousing, like a nonprofit, applying to business, get their leftovers, all of that, that is doing what I talk about, which is build alternative models, right? How do you build alternative models? You do it. You just go and you do it, right? And stop asking capitalists permission to do stuff. I think that's the big thing. Right? Like, I have definitely talked to people who are like, I want to do this, but I'm not sure, and I'm just like, fucking go do it. Make them stop you, right? Because the process of them stopping you requires resources for them. And here's something real that definitely happens, right? Walmart used to have mystery shoppers, right? And I say used to have, and the role of the mystery shopper was to go around and try to find people who are shoplifting. Right? And then catch him in the act, that kind of thing, right? Well, some bean counter at Walmart did a cost-benefit analysis of this, and they found out that it's actually costing the company more to have these mystery shoppers than the amount of theft that occurs. So they got rid of the mystery shopper, and they just basically say, yeah, people are going to steal. What are you going to do about it? Yeah. Right? Because that's the cost-benefit analysis. Right? It costs them more resources to stop you from doing something. And so make them cost those resources. And if everybody starts acting this way, they won't be able to keep up. They won't be able to keep up. So just do things. And stop asking permission. Because for God's sakes, these capitalists aren't asking your permission. They don't give a fuck. This is worth pointing out. 5,744 cases. This is a significant decline. Like, we were up at 15,000 cases at one point. And so we've had our spike up, and it looks like we're on our way down in terms of COVID. So, just wanted to glance off that. Yeah, Russia accuses Canada of ignoring numerous crimes by Ukraine amid rising tensions. No shit. Like, we're absolutely we're funding neo-Nazi groups, right? On Tuesday, Jolly tweeted a photo of her visiting the Wall of Remembrance in Kiev, which pays tribute to nearly 4,500 Ukrainian soldiers who have died fighting Russia-backed separatist forces in the country's east since 2014. Right? Jolly's tweet was more direct, calling the conflict the war against Russia. Like, 4,500 Ukrainian soldiers have died fighting Russians since 2014 in a NATO-backed, Nazi-fueled conflict. Like, just to give you a sense, we're so detached from this, right? Like, we don't really understand. Like, yeah, people are fucking dying over there. Like, it's a true conflict. It's like a true war. And it's completely happening with, like, nuclear bombs looming in the background, right? Like, the Russians are sitting there with their nuclear bombs, and the United States are sitting there with their nuclear bombs, and they're both just, like, looming and looking over it, while NATO funds, like, proxy forces through these Nazi-backed rebels, which everybody knows they're doing, and sending them into Russia to be blown up by the Russians. And then when the Russians actually blow these invading Ukrainians up, who are backed by the United States, everybody goes, "Oh, Russia!" It's just like, what? Doesn't make any fucking sense. Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine in 2014 after the ouster of Ukraine's Moscow-friendly leader, and also threw its weight behind a separatist insurgency that took over large sections in eastern Ukraine. More than 14,000 people have been killed in nearly 8 years of fighting there. So this is like... So Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula after the Crimean people voted in favor of it and asked Russia to do it. Right? That's always omitted. Right? They don't actually talk about the fact that Russia was doing what the Crimean people wanted. Amidst a coup, incidentally. Like, in 2014, there was a coup in Ukraine. Like, that the democratically elected leader of Ukraine was overthrown by NATO. And a far-right leader with Nazi ties was installed. And that happened in 2014. And then... and also threw its weight behind a separatist insurgency. Yeah, the people who fought back against the coup. Right? Like, the Ukrainian people weren't happy that a coup happened in their country. And the Russians backed the separatist insurgency. Right? The people who didn't like that there was a coup that happened. Those people are separatists. Right? You understand? You see how this is reported? Right? That people who are fighting against an illegitimate coup by NATO in their borders are separatists. Waka, wak, 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 wak. Wak. Wow, I'm actually running out of road. I'm actually running out of shit. Yeah, new Ontario poll gives Doug Ford's PC a 9-point lead. I'm literally gonna I'm gonna make like a TikTok and just be like, and have a have it be like Canadians be like, and the Canadian be like, the Conservatives did that, I'm gonna vote Liberal. The Liberals did that, I'm gonna vote Conservative, and then it just loops. So it's just like, It's like, that's what it is. We're very, very dumb. We're very, very dumb. And like, you look at this, Ontario government performance, crime and public safety, So the red is poor, very poor. The yellow is acceptable. And the green is very good. Right? So crime and public safety basically split between like acceptable and not acceptable. And like you go down the list, labor, the education system, like it's so the only thing that people actually think that the Ford administration is doing a good job on in overwhelming sort of numbers are things, and it's not even overwhelming, but in like slight margins, is crime and public safety, which makes sense given that the only thing he actually increased funding for was the cops, public transportation and congestion, racism and inequality. All right. But you go down to like the rising cost of living. Like these are the things that Canadians are most worried about, right? Like crime and public safety, public transportation, congestion, racism and inequality, like economic growth. These are things that are pretty low on the list of like stuff that Canadians are really worried about. What are Canadians really worried about? The rising cost of living. 67% people think poor. Housing affordability. 65% of Canadians poor. Right? Or Ontarians, rather. The healthcare system. 54% poor. Like, and these are the things when you ask Ontarians, what are you worried about? The COVID-19 pandemic. 50% poor. Like, the Ford is in trouble. Like, Ford's in trouble. And oh yeah, here you go. So this is exactly what we should be using. There you go. Like don't just listen to me. Fucking let's look at the evidence, right? The COVID-19 pandemic. What are the top issues, right? So the COVID-19 pandemic, according to this, 50% says poor. The number one issue. The rising cost of living. The number two issue. According to this, 67% on issue number two. Right? Issue number three, healthcare system. Boom. 54%. Housing affordability was next. 65%. Like, the Ford administration's in trouble. And what's annoying is that it looks like Canadians are going to, or Ontarians are going to be like, oh, well, Liberal, gotta vote Liberal. If you don't vote Liberal, it's like watching an old man have an aneurysm. Like, it really is. Like, it's just like... Finished teaching guitar, what did I miss? You missed everything, Garden Mice. Everything. I revealed the secrets of the universe while you were gone. Yep, Crimea had the autonomy to ask Russia to help them. And honestly, like, Ukraine was cooed. Like, I just don't think there's, like, rules. Like, really. Like, what are the rules under those circumstances? Right? And Crimea stood up and said, like, yo, we don't want to be part of this. And Russia went, yeah, bro. Like, Crimea had been part of Russia before. Like, and that's something that we don't actually consider. Like, we pretend, like, we like to pretend like we're stable and we're like a one kind of unity thing. And so any claim to territory, but like, these regions have shifted before, right? Like, there's a history, right? Perfect. I'm almost out of time here, so, yeah, the meaning of Life 42, you nailed it, dude. I'm surprised that half of Ontario is chill with Ford's handling of the pandemic. Yeah, they're fucking conservatives and liberals who aren't actually genuinely affected by it, right? Like, they just, hunker down, they're fine, right? Work from home. They don't actually have to deal with it. Capitalism can increase profit margins by not producing an additional thing. The big money is in limiting supply, not increasing it. Yep. Fake scarcity. False scarcity. Right? They did that with diamonds for a long time. Right? That the reason why diamonds were so expensive is because, like, there was one group that just owned all the diamonds. Ugh. One thing I want to share with you guys. Here, hold on. First of all, Eric is talking about the general chat. Oh, yeah, this is a 20-minute video.
Hi, my name is Aaron. This is my show, Reeducation.
Fantastic.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about capitalism and manufactured scarcity.
Fantastic. I love him already. And if he's going out into the world and he's actually like getting eggs and he's actually giving them away, we got a real leftist. Finally. Right? Forget about your Vosches and your Kalinskis and all these guys. Like, if you're going to talk a game against capitalism and then go out and actually do anything about it, you're a real leftist. Right? These guys that are just hiding behind the camera and just building up their base and all this kind of stuff, like they're Howard Stern shock jocks. We don't need to concern ourselves that much with them. They will always exist. Fighting against them is pointless, right? That maybe we can try to galvanize some of the people in their base in order to get forward. But the reality is that most of the people in their base are happy with just griping. So that if people wanted to actually find out how to get into the public and find out how to galvanize themselves and all that kind of stuff, there are avenues for that. And here's another one. Looks to me like here's another guy that's doing it. Off to the races, bud. Looks like he's an anarchist. I don't have the fundamentalism. I don't like. I call myself a communist. He calls himself an anarchist. My hope would that we would be able to find common ground with one another. That would be my hope, and that we would be able to organize together. That it'd be so disappointing if it was like the classic anarchist versus communist bullshit. I'm just like, come on, oof. Yeah, also diamonds are a manufactured want. Yeah, a lot of adverts went into that, for sure. So I'm going to take the last 5 minutes of this, and I'm going to do a personal chat about a personal thing that I'm doing. I am writing that Superman script, guys. 3 pages. A lot of it's visual, though. Right? The Superman theme plays. Pure, powerful, and true. Superman's symbol looms large on the screen. The camera zooms out to reveal it to be a symbol on the chest of a cartoon version of Superman. As the camera continues to zoom out, we see that it is a Superman comic book in a corner newsstand. The camera continues panning out to reveal the entirety of Metropolis. The music begins to fade as the sound of a muffled laughing grows louder. As the camera zooms out, the face of Brainiac can be seen looming over the city. Further out we go to see that Metropolis has been captured in a jar, which Brainiac is holding up, laughing. He is holding his other hand over a button on a gigantic machine, which the machine is in front of the sun. I forgot to write that down. The camera zooms out as Superman jumps into the frame. Huh? How's that for an opening? Huh? Watchable. Right? Immediately watchable. You're just like, ba 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 ba, and then it immediately reveals this like global, like solar system level threat with Brainiac capturing Metropolis, gonna destroy the sun with a machine. And then he's immediately banished to the Phantom Zone. As Superman villains are often banished to the Phantom Zone. Right? And then he goes down, and then this is all kind of character moments between Superman and Batman. And then a comet starts heading towards the Earth. Superman goes to get it, and then it's Doomsday. Doomsday beats the fuck out of him. Superman throws him into space, but then is in space himself, and then he collides with the moon, the dark side of the moon. And then he wakes up, right? And then he realizes that 40 years has passed since his fight with Doomsday, which they call him Doomsday because it was like a Doomsday event. The moment Superman disappeared. Yeah, what a tone shift. Let's talk about Superman. Dun, 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 dun. Why can't we tell a good Superman story? Right? And it is because we have lost connection with heroes. We don't really believe in heroes anymore. We don't really have a connection to the hero's journey. all of the heroes that are presented to us now are either just so like take Rey from Star Wars. She's just flawless, right? Like she's you can't actually relate with her because she's not a person, right? She doesn't really have any goals. She doesn't really have anything. And every time she is confronted with a conflict, she just defeats it. She just completely just and defeats it in a manner that is like batting it aside. And it's like she's not really a person. So she's not relatable, so she's not a hero. And in the process of doing that, they actually destroy our old heroes. Like Luke Skywalker. They destroyed Luke Skywalker. Like if you're genuinely trying to tell me that is the end of Luke Skywalker, then he is destroyed as a character. That he's no longer a serious hero. Right? And like who are the heroes? What's the heroic story that's being told? Harry Potter? Like, Harry Potter is a pretty straightforward heroic, and there's a reason why Harry Potter gets, like, all of the accolades and all the craziness that he does, because he's a hero. But, like, outside of that, who's the hero? Who's the heroes in our society? Like, we don't care about Jesus Christ anymore, culturally. Even the people who like Jesus don't really care about him. They don't read his stuff, and they don't know anything about him. They don't try to live like Jesus would want them to. So, it doesn't matter. Right? Like, and Superman. Like, they can't tell a good Superman story. And you can see it. Like, go watch some of the new Superman stuff. It's kind of empty. Right? There's an emptiness to it. Because our storytellers no longer believe in heroism. Our storytellers no longer really believe in the idea that someone can do good for the sake of doing good and sacrifice themselves for others, right? Just doesn't really exist in our society anymore. And so, and once I heard that they're struggling to write a good Superman story, I immediately was just like, challenge accepted. I don't even care if I sell it. Like, I don't care. I don't give a fuck about the capitalism. Go fuck your capitalism, right? I want to write the story because I believe that I can write a heroic story of Superman. And, like, he immediately is heroic. Like, he immediately defeats Brainiac, and then in this conflict with Doomsday, sacrifices his own life in order to save to save the Earth, right? And then immediately it turns into a fish out of water story. And where it goes from here is Superman realizing what's going on in his society. It's been taken over by Lex Luthor through corporate power, right? And Lex Luthor is actually siphoning away the core of the Earth to Darkseid, right? To power Darkseid's army. That's what it's going to be. And Superman's going to steadily figure it out. And then Superman will confront Luthor, and Luthor will be like, "You were gone. I had to do this to save humanity." And then Superman will go and defeat Darkseid the way that Superman does, and then come back. But Luthor won't be willing to relinquish his power, and so Superman will have to confront him using the people themselves. That the people themselves will have to confront Luthor, because everything Luthor is doing is being done legally. So Superman will have to foment an uprising, which is why the piece is called Superman Uprising. Yeah, it's going to be a cool script. I'm really looking forward to this. Which, incidentally, if you would like access to scripts that I write like this, because I have a Jafar script, for example, a redemption arc from Jafar. If you donate at the $10 Patreon level and send me a message, I will send you that script. Not only will I send you that script, I will send you a reading of that script. So you don't even need to read it. You can listen to me just talk it out. I don't know why I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about it. That's all. Like, I don't know why I'm writing this. I just want to. And because honestly, it offends me. It offends me that people are saying, oh, we're having trouble writing a Superman script. I'm like, really? Superman script seems like the most basic shit to me. Like, straight up. Like, I feel like you can just crank a Superman script out. Like, he's a fucking hero. Like, he's the hero's hero, right? He's humble. He's raised by rural folk, right? Like, he's about self-sacrifice. He's about facing galactic powerful beings in this enormous story. I just don't. How do you miss? You know? How do you miss? Just tell a cool story about a dude beating the shit out of fucking monsters. Like, I don't. How do you miss this? We're real struggling. We're struggling. Welders are the real woman of steel. All right. All right, guys. Well, now that I've told you all about my Superman script, we've reached the end of it. Once again. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. Grinning seems to like the welders amongst us. That's good. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to ensure that you don't realize that you are a quantum being. Because if you do, you might actually think you're just as valid as they are. Hey Dave, how you doing? Hi, bye. Good to see you, bud. Hope things are going well for you. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're gonna need it.